When I asked my daughter about the wedding date, she laughed and said, "We got married yesterday, Dad. It was just for special people." Not you. 5 days later, she called in a panic. "The rent is overdue. The landlord is threatening eviction. What is going on?" I leaned back in my chair and replied simply, "Didn't I tell you? I only pay for special people. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who underestimated your worth. My name is Garrett Freeman, and I am 68 years old. If you saw me walking down the street, you would not look twice. I wear flannel shirts that have seen better days and work boots that are stained with oil and mud. I drive a 1998 Ford F-150 that rattles when it hits 40 miles per hour. My hands are rough callous like sandpaper from 40 years of pulling wire and climbing utility poles in the freezing Chicago wind. Most people look at me and see a retired handyman or a man who barely scraped by his whole life. That is exactly how I like it. Silence is a powerful thing. It lets you hear what people really think when they assume you have nothing. My daughter Kendra and her new husband Blake certainly thought I had nothing. They saw the grease under my fingernails, but they never saw the bank statements locked in my floor safe. They saw the peeling paint on my front porch, but they never saw the deed to the commercial skyscraper downtown that bears my holding company name. I never corrected them. I wanted Kendra to build her own character. I wanted her to love me for the father who raised her, not the checkbook that could solve her problems. It was a Saturday morning, and the air in my garage smelled of old oil and sawdust. It was my sanctuary. I was wiping down a socket wrench, enjoying the quiet hum of the refrigerator in the corner. I had been thinking about the wedding for months. Kendra had been vague about the details. Every time I asked, she would say, "Oh, Dad, we are still finalizing the venue," or "Dad, do not worry about it yet, it is going to be small." But I knew Blake came from a family that did not do small. His parents, the Sterlings, were old money, or at least they acted like it. I wiped my hands on a rag and pulled my phone from my pocket. I needed to know the date. I wanted to go to the tailor on 47th Street. I had not bought a custom suit in 20 years, but for my little girl walking down the aisle, I wanted to look sharp. I wanted to make her proud. I dialed her number. It rang 4 times before she picked up. "Hey, Dad, make it quick, we are busy." Her voice was breathless, loud. She had me on speakerphone. I could hear clinking glasses in the background and the low thrum of jazz music. I could hear Blake laughing at something someone else said. "Hi, honey, I am sorry to bother you," I said, keeping my voice gentle. "I was just looking at my calendar. I need to know the date of the wedding so I can get fitted for a suit. I want to make sure I match the color scheme." There was a sudden silence on the other end. The background noise seemed to drop away, or maybe someone turned the volume down. Then came a sound that hit me harder than any physical blow ever could. It was a giggle, a nervous, dismissive giggle. "Oh, Dad." Kendra's voice was dripping with a strange mixture of pity and annoyance. "We already did it." I froze. The rag in my hand stopped moving. I stared at the oil stain on my workbench. "What do you mean you already did it?" "Yesterday, Dad. We got married yesterday at the country club. It was beautiful. The weather was perfect." I felt a cold numbness spread from my chest to my fingertips. Yesterday, my only child, the girl I had braided hair for, the girl I had taught to ride a bike, the girl who cried on my shoulder when she didn't get into her first choice of college. She got married yesterday, and I was standing in my garage wiping tools. Why, I whispered. "Why didn't you tell me?" Blake's voice cut in booming through the speakerphone. He sounded arrogant, smooth, and slightly drunk. "Look, Garrett, don't make this a thing. My parents paid for the venue, so they handled the guest list. It was a very exclusive event, very high society. Honestly, we just didn't think you would fit in." "Fit in?" The words hung in the dusty air of my garage. Kendra chimed in her voice, rushing to justify him. "Blake is right, Dad. It was an intimate thing. Just for special people. You know, influential people, investors, friends of the Sterlings. We didn't want you to feel uncomfortable. You know how you get around fancy crowds. You would have just stood in the corner in your old clothes. It would have been embarrassing for everyone. Special people." I looked down at the workbench. Resting there right next to my toolbox was a cream-colored envelope. Inside was a cashier's check I had drawn up the day before, $50,000. It was my wedding gift to them. A down payment on a house so they wouldn't have to keep renting that overpriced penthouse apartment. I had worked overtime shifts in blizzards for that money. I had climbed poles when the ice was an inch thick and the wind was howling like a banshee just to put that money aside for this day. Embarrassing, I repeated slowly. Yeah, Dad, embarrassing, Blake laughed. Imagine that rusty truck of yours pulling up to the valet stand next to Porsches and Bentleys. They might have tried to tow you. The disrespect was not a sudden slap. It was a slow suffocation. It was the culmination of years of small slights. Years of Kendra rolling her eyes when I told stories about my work. Years of Blake making jokes about blue-collar workers while drinking beer I bought. I reached out and picked up the envelope. My hand was steady, steadier than it should have been. So I am not a special person, I asked. My voice was flat, devoid of the rage that was building like a pressure cooker inside my gut. Don't be dramatic, Dad, Kendra sighed. We will come visit you in a few weeks. Maybe we can have a barbecue in your backyard or something. That is more your speed. Just let us enjoy our weekend. We are celebrating. Celebrating. They were celebrating their union by excluding the man who made it possible. My mind flashed back 20 years. I saw myself sitting in a cold hospital waiting room, still wearing my work boots, smelling of ozone and sweat. My wife Sarah had just passed. An aneurysm. Sudden. Brutal. Kendra was 6 years old. I remembered looking at her sleeping on the plastic chair, her thumb in her mouth. I remembered promising her that she would never want for anything. I worked 3 jobs. I was a lineman by day, a janitor by night, and I flipped houses on the weekends before flipping houses was a trend on television. I saved every penny. I wore the same coat for 12 years so she could wear brand-name jeans. I ate bologna sandwiches in my truck so she could have a meal plan at the private university. And now I wasn't special enough to see her say I do. I took my lighter from my pocket. It was an old Zippo, scratched and worn. I flicked it open. The flame danced in the dim light of the garage. Okay, I said. I understand. Really? Kendra sounded relieved. Thanks for not making a scene, Dad. We knew you would get it eventually. Oh, I get it. I get it perfectly. I held the corner of the envelope to the flame. The thick, expensive paper caught fire instantly. The fire curled upward, turning the cashier's check into black ash. $50,000. Gone in seconds. I watched the numbers disappear. The ink bubbled and vanished. I felt a strange sense of release. It wasn't anger anymore. It was clarity. One more thing, Dad, Kendra said. Since we are married now, we are going to need a bigger place soon. Blake's startup is going to take off any day now, but until then we might need you to cover the lease on the penthouse for another year, just until we get settled. I dropped the burning remains of the check onto the concrete floor and crushed the embers with the heel of my boot. You want me to pay the rent? Well, yeah. You have been paying it for 3 years, Dad. It is not a big deal. Consider it your wedding contribution since you didn't have to buy a suit or a gift. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of gasoline and old wood. Sure, Kendra, I said. Don't worry about the rent. Thanks, Dad, you're the best. We have to go. Champagne is waiting. Love you. The line went dead. I stood there in the silence of my garage for a long time. I looked at the black smudge on the floor where the check had been. They thought I was a resource, a bottomless well they could draw from while treating me like the dirt around the rim. They thought I was stupid. A simple man who was lucky to be allowed to pay their bills. I walked over to the wall behind my tool rack. I moved a heavy cabinet aside, revealing a wall safe. I spun the dial, left, right, left. The heavy steel door clicked open. Inside were stacks of documents, deeds, bonds, certificates of deposit, and a black leather ledger. I pulled the ledger out. I opened it to the page marked Kendra. For years I had tracked every cent I spent on her. Not because I wanted to be repaid, but because I wanted to be fair. I was a businessman after all. I ran my finger down the columns. Private school tuition, university housing, her first car, her second car after she wrecked the first one, the rent on the downtown penthouse she insisted she needed for her image. The credit card bills I quietly paid off so her credit score wouldn't tank. It totaled hundreds of thousands of dollars. I had given it freely out of love, out of a promise to a dying woman. But that promise was fulfilled. Kendra was a grown woman now, a married woman, a special person. I picked up a red pen from the workbench. I drew a thick double line under the last entry. Rent $4,500. Paid. Then I wrote in bold letters underneath it, account closed. I walked back to the phone and dialed my bank. It was Saturday, but when you have the kind of accounts I have, you have a private banker who answers on the first ring. Mr. Freeman? Mrs. Higgins answered. How can I help you today, Alice? I said, my voice calm and cold. I need to make a change to my standing orders. Of course, Mr. Freeman. Which one? The monthly transfer to the Shadowy Hills Management Group. The rent for apartment 4B. Yes, sir. You want to adjust the amount? No, Alice. Cancel it. Cancel it, sir. Effective when effective. Yesterday, I said, looking at the ash on the floor. Yesterday was a special day. There was a pause. I knew Alice knew the situation. She saw the money going out every month. Understood, Mr. Freeman. I will put the stop payment on immediately. The draft for this month was scheduled to go out next Tuesday. It will be canceled. Thank you, Alice. And one more thing. Yes, sir, the Mercedes G-Wagon. The lease is in my name, right? Yes, sir. You are the primary leaseholder. Ms. Kendra is the authorized driver. Report it as an unauthorized possession. Initiate the repossession protocol. Mr. Freeman, are you sure that will involve the police and towing services? I am sure, Alice. It seems the driver is not authorized to be in my family anymore. I hung up the phone. I sat down on my old wooden stool. The garage was quiet again. I looked at my hands. They were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I had spent my whole life building things, constructing, fixing, holding things together with wire and tape and sheer will. Today, for the first time in my life, I was going to enjoy tearing something down. Kendra wanted to live in a world of special people. She wanted exclusivity. She wanted to look down on the man in the work boots. I picked up the rag and went back to cleaning my wrench. Well, congratulations, sweetheart. You just graduated. Welcome to the real world. I knew it would take about 5 days. The landlord at the Weston Tower was a shark. I knew him. In fact, I had played golf with him twice last year, though he knew me as Mr. G, not Kendra's father. He didn't tolerate late payments. I waited. I went about my routine. I fixed the gutter on the back porch. I watched the football game on Sunday. I ate my dinner in peace. Wednesday came. Then Thursday. On Friday morning, exactly 5 days after the wedding call, my phone rang. It was Kendra. I let it ring 3 times before answering. I put it on speakerphone and set it on the workbench, just like I had done before. Hello, I said. Dad, Kendra's voice was high-pitched, bordering on hysterical. There was no background music this time, no laughter, just the sound of panic. Dad, what is going on? The landlord just called. He said the rent check bounced. He said he hasn't received the transfer. He posted a notice on our door. Dad, a bright orange notice, the neighbors can see it. I picked up a screwdriver and examined the tip. Oh, that is strange, I said. Strange. It is a disaster. Blake is freaking out. He has a meeting here in an hour with an investor. We can't have an eviction notice on the door. You have to fix this. Call the bank. Transfer the money right now. I leaned in close to the phone. I can't do that, Kendra. What do you mean you can't? Did you lose your job? Did something happen? No, I said. I didn't lose anything. I actually gained something. I gained clarity. Dad, what are you talking about? Just send the money. I smiled. It was a cold, hard smile. I told you, Kendra. I canceled the payment. You what? Why? Because of what you said on Saturday. What did I say? Dad, stop playing games. You said the wedding was for special people. You said I wouldn't fit in. You were right. I don't fit in with people who live in penthouses they can't afford. I don't fit in with people who mock the hands that feed them. Dad, please, you are overreacting. It was just a wedding. And this is just rent, I said. You are a special person now, Kendra. You have a rich husband with a startup. You have the Sterlings. Surely special people can pay their own rent. Dad, stop it. Blake doesn't have the money yet. The investors are still. That sounds like a special person problem, I interrupted. Dad, please. Didn't I tell you? Tell me what, she screamed. I only pay for special people. And sweetheart, you just became very ordinary. I hung up the phone. Then I blocked the number. I stood up and walked out of the garage into the bright morning sunlight. Ideally, I would have felt sad. A father should feel sad when he cuts off his child. But I didn't feel sad. I felt like I had finally put down a heavy load I had been carrying up a hill for 20 years. But I knew this wasn't over. I knew Blake. I knew his pride. And I knew they wouldn't just accept this. They would come for me. They would come to my house with their expensive car and their arrogance, and they would try to bully the old handyman. Let them come. I looked at the driveway. I looked at the property line. I walked back into the house and made a pot of coffee. It was going to be an interesting afternoon. The silence in my house over the next 5 days was heavy, but it was not empty. It was the kind of silence that fills a room before a thunderstorm breaks. I went about my daily routine with a mechanical precision. I woke up at 5 in the morning just like I had for 40 years. I brewed my coffee black and strong. I sat on my porch and watched the sun rise over the neighborhood of modest single-story homes where I had lived my entire adult life. But inside I was counting down. I knew the rhythm of my daughter's life better than she knew it herself. I knew that on the first of the month she ignored her bills. On the second she went shopping to make herself feel better about the bills she had ignored. On the third she complained to Blake about money. And on the fifth she called me. The 5th of the month was rent day for the penthouse at the Weston Tower. I had set up the automatic transfer 3 years ago. It was the day she moved in with Blake. I remember standing in the lobby of that building looking at the marble floors and the doorman in the gold-braided uniform. I remembered thinking that the rent for that one apartment was more than my father had made in an entire year of sharecropping. I remembered signing the guarantee papers, while Blake stood by the window complaining about the view of the city not being panoramic enough. I had paid that rent every single month for 36 months. $162,000, enough to buy a house in my neighborhood cash, enough to put a child through medical school. And I had done it because I wanted her to be safe. Because I wanted her to have the start in life I never had. But safety is one thing. Disrespect is another. Wednesday passed. Then Thursday. I checked my online banking app on my phone. The balance in my checking account sat there unchanged. The automatic transfer labeled Kendra Rent Support had a red line through it. Status canceled. It looked beautiful. Friday morning arrived. The 5th. I was in the kitchen frying bacon in my cast iron skillet. The smell of the grease was comforting. It was honest. It smelled like home. At 9 in the morning exactly, my phone buzzed on the counter. The screen lit up with her face. It was a photo from her college graduation, the one where she was actually smiling at me. I looked at it and felt a pang of old grief, but I swallowed it down with a sip of hot coffee. I wiped my hands on a paper towel and tapped the speaker button. Dad. There was no hello, no how are you, no apology for the wedding snub. Her voice was sharp, tight, and edged with a panic she was trying to disguise as annoyance. "Good morning, Kendra," I said calmly, flipping a strip of bacon. "Dad, did you change banks or something?" I leaned against the counter, crossing my ankles. "No, honey, same bank I have had since 1980. Why do you ask?" "Because the landlord just called us Dad. He called Blake's personal cell phone while he was in a meeting. It was humiliating. He said the rent transfer did not go through. He said it was rejected." I took a bite of toast. The crunch was loud in the quiet kitchen. "Is that so?" I said. "That is unfortunate." "Unfortunate, Dad, it is a disaster. It is the 5th. If it is not paid by noon, we get hit with a late fee. A 10% late fee, Dad. That is $450. You need to call your bank right now. It must be a glitch or a fraud alert or something. Fix it fast, please." Blake is freaking out. She was commanding me. She was ordering me to fix a problem she had created in a life she could not afford. She sounded exactly like the people I used to work for, the ones who would snap their fingers at me when the power went out during a storm, expecting me to climb a pole in freezing rain just so they could watch television. "It is not a glitch, Kendra," I said. My voice was steady, level, and cold. "What do you mean?" "I mean there is no error with the bank. The transfer did not go through because I stopped it." The silence on the other end was absolute. It lasted for 5 seconds. I could hear her breathing. I could hear the gears in her mind trying to turn, trying to process a reality she had never encountered before. A reality where the bank of Dad was closed. "You stopped it," she whispered. "That is right." "But Dad, why? You know we cannot cover that right now. All our cash is tied up in the wedding and Blake's business. You promised. You said you would help us until we got settled." "I did promise," I said. "But promises are based on mutual respect, Kendra. They are a two-way street. You broke the contract." "What contract? What are you talking about? I am your daughter. You were my daughter when you planned a wedding for 6 months and didn't tell me I said." You were my daughter when you booked a venue at a country club where I have fixed the wiring but was never allowed to eat. You were my daughter when you told me on the phone 5 days ago that I wasn't special enough to witness your marriage. Dad, oh my God, are you still on that? She groaned. Her voice shifted from panic to anger. You are being so petty. This is about your ego, isn't it? Because we didn't invite you to a party, you are going to make us homeless. That is insane, Dad. That is narcissistic. Narcissistic. The word hung in the air. I looked around my kitchen. My laminate countertops from the 90s. My linoleum floor. My second-hand refrigerator. I thought about the $4,500 a month I sent to a building where the lobby smelled like expensive perfume and old money. I am not the one living in a penthouse I cannot afford. Kendra, I said, I am not the one who needs to pretend to be rich to impress people who do not care about me. Dad, stop lecturing me, she snapped. Just pay the rent. We can talk about your feelings later. Right now, I have a crisis. No, I said. You have a bill. There is a difference. Dad, I am warning you. I raised an eyebrow even though she couldn't see me. You are warning me. Yes, I am. If you do not pay this rent today, if you let us get evicted or embarrassed because of your little temper tantrum, then you need to think about the future. The future, I asked. Yes, the future. Blake and I are starting a family soon, Dad. We have been talking about it. You always said you wanted to be a grandfather. You always talked about teaching your grandson how to fish and how to fix cars. My hand tightened around the coffee mug. She knew exactly where to aim. She knew my weak spot. Since Sarah died, all I had wanted was to see the family line continue, to hold a baby that shared my blood, to have a second chance to do it right. She continued, her voice dripping with venom. If you cut us off now, Dad, you are cutting off everything. Do not expect to see your grandchildren. Do not expect to be part of their lives. You will not be the grandpa who comes over for Christmas. You will be the bitter old man we don't talk about. Is $4,500 worth never meeting your own flesh and blood? It was a low blow. It was the lowest blow she could have thrown. She was using unborn children as hostages. She was weaponizing my love for a future generation to secure her lifestyle today. I closed my eyes. I saw Sarah's face. I saw the integrity she had. I saw the way she looked at me with pride when I came home dirty and tired because she knew I was building a life for us. And then I realized something. If Kendra raised children, they would be just like her. They would be raised to see me as an ATM. They would be raised to be ashamed of me. I opened my eyes. The pain was there, but the resolve was stronger. You are right, Kendra, I said softly. She exhaled, thinking she had won, thinking the threat had worked. See, Dad, I knew you would be reasonable. Just send the wire and we can forget this conversation happened. No, Kendra, I said. You misunderstand me. You are right that I need to think about the future. And in the future, I do not want to be an ATM for people who despise me. What? I thought special people didn't need money from an old handyman, I said, using the words she had thrown at me 5 days ago. I thought you were part of the elite now. Surely the Sterling family can pay your rent. Surely your high society friends can help you out. Why are you calling the man with the rusty truck? Dad, stop it. Pay the rent, she screamed. I walked over to the window and looked out at my truck parked in the driveway. It was old. It was beat up. But it was paid for. It was mine. I canceled the standing order this morning, Kendra. It is done. The bank cannot reverse it. The money is staying where it belongs. You are ruining my life, she shrieked. No, sweetheart, I said. I am letting you own your life. You wanted to be a grown-up. You wanted to be independent and special. This is what it feels like. It feels like bills. It feels like responsibility. I hate you, she hissed. I hate you so much. I know, I said, and that is exactly why I am not paying. I hung up the phone. I stood there in the kitchen for a long time staring at the black screen of my cell phone. My heart was beating hard in my chest, a slow, heavy rhythm. It hurt. Of course it hurt. No father wants to hear his child say those words. No father wants to be threatened with the loss of grandchildren he has not even met yet. But as the silence of the house settled back around me, I felt something else underneath the pain. I felt a strange lightness. For 3 years, I had carried the weight of their lifestyle on my back. I had worried about their bills more than they had. I had stressed about their credit scores while they posted pictures of champagne brunches on social media. That weight was gone. I sat down at my kitchen table and finished my bacon. It was cold now, but it still tasted good. I knew this wasn't over. Kendra was desperate, and desperation makes people dangerous. She had played her ace card, the grandchildren, and I had called her bluff. Now she would go to Blake. And Blake, with his fragile ego and his arrogance, would not take this lying down. They would come for me. I knew it. They would drive that silver Mercedes I paid for right up to my curb, and they would try to intimidate me. They would try to shame me. They would try to make me feel small in my own house. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 9:15. It would take them about 40 minutes to drive here from the city if traffic was light. I stood up and washed my plate. I dried it and put it away in the cupboard. Then I walked into the living room and sat in my recliner. The leather was worn and cracked in places, but it fit me perfectly. I picked up the newspaper. I was ready. Let them come. Let them bring their anger and their entitlement. They were about to find out that the man they thought was a pushover was actually made of steel-reinforced concrete. They were about to find out that you can kick a dog only so many times before it bites back. I turned the page of the newspaper and waited for the sound of an expensive engine in my driveway. The lesson was just beginning. It took exactly 42 minutes for the silver Mercedes to pull into my driveway. I was sitting in my recliner, the newspaper folded in my lap, watching through the front window. The car looked like a spaceship that had landed in the wrong galaxy. My neighborhood is full of Ford trucks and Honda Civics cars that people drive to work not to show off. The Mercedes gleamed in the morning sun, a shining beacon of debt and pretension. I did not get up. I did not go to the door to welcome them. I stayed right where I was. The car doors slammed shut. I saw Blake get out first. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than my first car. It was a light gray linen suit tailored to fit him perfectly, paired with a white shirt unbuttoned at the top to show off his chest hair. He adjusted his sunglasses and looked at my house with a sneer that curled his upper lip. He looked like he smelled something bad. Kendra got out of the passenger side. She was wearing a white sundress and oversized sunglasses, holding a designer purse that I knew I had paid for 3 Christmases ago. She looked frantic, pacing back and forth on the cracked concrete of my driveway while Blake marched toward the front door. He didn't knock. He pounded. 3 heavy, aggressive thuds that rattled the old wood frame. "Open up, Garrett. We know you are in there." I took a slow sip of my coffee. It was lukewarm now, but I drank it anyway. He pounded again. "I am not playing games, old man. Open this door right now." I stood up slowly. My knees popped a reminder of 30 years climbing utility poles. I walked to the door and unlocked the deadbolt. I turned the handle and pulled it open. Blake was standing there, his hand raised to pound again. When he saw me, he didn't step back. He stepped forward, invading my personal space, pushing his way into my living room as if he owned the deed. Kendra followed him close behind, looking nervous but determined. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Blake shouted. His voice was booming, filling the small room. He looked around with open disgust. His eyes darted from the worn carpet to the faded wallpaper to the old recliner that had been my throne for 20 years. "Jesus, Garrett, it smells like grease and old people in here. How do you live like this?" I closed the door gently behind them. I leaned against it, crossing my arms over my chest. "Hello to you too, Blake," I said. "To what do I owe the pleasure of this intrusion?" "Intrusion?" Blake laughed, a harsh barking sound. "You are the one intruding on our lives, Garrett. You are the one sabotaging us. You cut off the rent. You threatened to tow the car. Who do you think you are?" "I am the man whose name is on the lease," I said calmly. "And I am the man whose name is on the title of that car. That makes me the owner. And you, the passenger." Blake reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a sheaf of papers. He threw them onto my small coffee table. They scattered across the surface, sliding over my coasters and remote control. "These are bills, Garrett bills. We have the rent, we have the car insurance, we have the credit card statement for the honeymoon. You are responsible for these." I looked at the papers. I didn't pick them up. "I am not responsible for anything, Blake. I am not your father, and I am certainly not your employer." "Employer," Blake scoffed. He walked over to the mantel above my fake fireplace and picked up a framed photo of Sarah. He looked at it for a second, then set it back down face down. "I do not need an employer. I am an entrepreneur. I am a visionary. My startup is going to change the way people interact with digital currency. I am building an empire, Garrett. An empire." And you are trying to cripple me right at the finish line because of your petty ego. He turned to face me, his face red with indignation. You have a moral obligation to support us. Kendra is your daughter. I am her husband. My success is her success. If my company fails because I am worried about rent, then you are failing her. You are being a bad father. I looked at him. I really looked at him. I looked down at his feet. He was wearing loafers, Italian leather, soft, supple leather with no socks. They were shoes made for walking on carpet and marble, shoes made for boardrooms and country clubs. They were shoes that had never seen a day of hard work in their life. My mind drifted back 40 years. I remembered the winter of 1982. The blizzard of the century, they called it. The wind chill was 40 below zero. I was wearing a pair of steel-toed boots I had bought at a surplus store. The leather was stiff and the soles were thin. I had stuffed them with newspaper to try to keep my toes from freezing. I remembered climbing a 40-foot pole, the ice cutting into my face, my hands so numb I couldn't feel the pliers. I remembered thinking that if I fell, I would die and my wife and baby girl would be alone. I stayed on that pole for 6 hours fixing the line so the rich folks in the big houses on the hill could have their heat and their lights. When I came down, my boots were frozen solid. I had to cut the laces to get them off. My feet were blue. And here was this boy standing in my living room in shoes that cost more than I made that entire winter, telling me about his empire, telling me about my obligations. He had never known what it meant to be cold. He had never known what it meant to be hungry so your child could eat. He thought building an empire meant convincing people to give you money for an app that didn't exist yet. "Garrett, are you listening to me?" Blake shouted, snapping his fingers in front of my face. I blinked, coming back to the present. "I hear you, Blake," I said. "You are loud. It is hard not to hear you. Then fix this. Write a check. Transfer the funds. Apologize to Kendra and maybe we will let you see the grandkids when they come. But right now you are on thin ice. Old man, very thin ice." Kendra stepped forward then. She put a hand on Blake's arm, but she was looking at me. "Dad, please. Just pay it. Blake is under a lot of stress. The investors are watching us. We cannot look poor. We cannot look like we are struggling. It ruins the image. You know how it is." I looked at my daughter, the girl I had carried on my shoulders, the girl I had taught to drive in the very truck that Blake had mocked. "I do not know how it is, Kendra," I said softly. "I have never cared about image. I cared about reality. And the reality is, you are broke." "How dare you?" Blake stepped closer, his face inches from mine. "You do not talk to her like that. You do not talk to us like that. You are a nobody, Garrett. A handyman, a grease monkey. You fixed wires for a living. I am creating the future. You should be honored to support us. You should be thanking me for elevating your daughter to a station you could never reach." He poked me in the chest, a hard jab with his index finger. "Now get your checkbook, and do it fast. We have a lunch reservation at 1. Something inside me clicked. It was the sound of a breaker tripping, the sound of a fuse blowing to protect the system. I didn't yell. I didn't shove him back. I simply turned around and walked to the corner of the room behind the recliner. "Where are you going?" Blake yelled. "The checkbook is in the kitchen, isn't it?" I reached behind the chair and wrapped my hand around the handle of my old Louisville Slugger. It was ash wood, solid and heavy. I had kept it there for 20 years, ever since a break-in down the street. I had never used it. I lifted it. The weight felt good, familiar, like a tool. I turned back around. Blake's eyes went wide. He took a step back, his hands coming up in front of him. Kendra gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Whoa, whoa! What are you doing?" Blake stammered, his voice suddenly losing its boom. "Are you crazy?" I walked toward them slowly. I didn't raise the bat. I just held it at my side, tapping it gently against my leg. Thud, thud, thud. "You have 30 seconds, I said. My voice was low, devoid of emotion. 30 seconds for what Kendra shrieked. Dad, put that down. "You are scaring me. You have 30 seconds to get off my property," I said. 30 seconds to get your Italian loafers and your designer purse and your entitlement out of my house. "You cannot threaten me," Blake shouted, though he was backing toward the door now. "I will sue you. I will call the police." "Go ahead," I said, taking another step. "Call them. Tell them you broke into a man's house and demanded money. Tell them you assaulted a senior citizen in his own living room. See who they arrest. I am not leaving until I get my money," Blake yelled, but his back was against the door now. 20 seconds, I said. Dad, stop. Kendra was crying now, real tears of fear. This is insane. We are your family. Family doesn't treat people like ATMs. Kendra, I said. Family doesn't mock the man who fed them. Family doesn't poke a man in the chest in his own home. 10 seconds. I raised the bat just an inch, just enough to show them the weight of it, just enough to show them that the old lineman still had the strength to swing it. You are going to regret this, Garrett Blake screamed, his voice cracking. You are going to die alone in this dump. No one will come to your funeral. No one will care. 5 seconds. I took a step forward, raising the bat a little higher. Get out, I roared. The sound came from deep in my chest, a release of 20 years of silence. Blake fumbled with the doorknob, his hands shaking. He threw the door open and practically fell out onto the porch. Kendra scrambled after him, sobbing. They ran to the Mercedes. Blake didn't even open the door for her this time. He jumped in the driver's seat and started the engine. Kendra yanked her door open and threw herself inside. I walked out onto the porch, the bat resting on my shoulder. I watched as Blake threw the car into reverse tires, screeching on my driveway. He backed out so fast he almost hit my mailbox. He slammed it into drive and peeled away the engine, roaring like a wounded animal. I watched them go. I watched the silver car disappear down the street, past the rows of modest houses, past the neighbors who were out watering their lawns. I stood there for a long time. The bat felt heavy now. My adrenaline was fading, leaving me tired. I looked down at the driveway. There was a black skid mark where Blake had peeled out, a scar on the concrete. I went back inside. I locked the deadbolt. I looked at the papers scattered on the coffee table, the bills, the demands. I gathered them up in a pile. I didn't read them. I didn't care about the amounts. I walked to the kitchen and threw them in the trash. Then I went to the sink and washed my hands. I scrubbed them hard, trying to get the feeling of Blake's presence off my skin. I looked at the phone. It was silent. I knew they were gone, but I knew they weren't finished. Blake was a coward, but cowards are dangerous when they are cornered. He needed money. He needed it bad, and he knew I had it. He wouldn't come back here, not with the bat, but he would try something else. He would try to be clever. He would try to use the system against me. I walked to my office, a small room off the kitchen. I sat down at my desk and pulled out a file. It was labeled Asset Protection. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in a while. Cohen and Associates Law Firm, a voice answered. I need to speak to Saul, I said. It is Garrett Freeman. Hold, please, Mr. Freeman. A moment later, a gravelly voice came on the line. Garrett, you old son of a gun. I haven't heard from you since we closed on the mall deal. What can I do for you? Saul, I said, leaning back in my chair. I need you to activate the prodigal child protocol. There was a pause. You sure, Garrett? That is the nuclear option. Once we start that ball rolling, it is hard to stop. It involves asset freezes, title transfers, the whole 9 yards. I am sure, Saul. They came to my house today. They threatened me. They what? They demanded money, Saul. They insulted me. And they tried to use my grandkids as leverage. Say no more, Garrett. I will have the paperwork ready by this afternoon. Do you want to start with the car? Start with the car, I said. And Saul, yeah, Garrett. Find out who holds the debt on Blake's startup. I want to buy it. I heard Saul chuckle. It was a dry, dusty sound. You are a cold man, Garrett. I am a businessman, Saul, and I just found a distressed asset I want to liquidate. I hung up the phone. I looked out the window at the empty driveway. The sun was high in the sky now. It was a beautiful day. I wasn't a special person. I wasn't elite. But I was about to teach the elites a lesson they would never forget. The lesson of what happens when you wake a sleeping giant. I stood up and went to the garage. I had work to do. I had a truck to fix and an empire to dismantle. The silver Mercedes tore down the asphalt of Interstate 90, weaving in and out of the Saturday morning traffic. Inside the cabin, the air was thick enough to choke on. The smell of expensive leather, usually a source of pride for Blake, now felt suffocating. He gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white, his eyes darting constantly to the rearview mirror as if he expected the old man to be chasing them with that baseball bat. But the road behind them was clear. Kendra sat in the passenger seat, clutching her designer bag to her chest, her breathing shallow and ragged. She looked at her husband, waiting for him to explode or to fix things. She was used to him fixing things, or at least pretending to. Blake, I do not understand, she whispered, her voice trembling. Why did he do that? He has never been violent. He has never even raised his voice at me. That was not my dad. Blake let out a breath that was half laugh and half sob. That was a lunatic Kendra. That was a man who has lost his mind. I told you he was unstable. I told you living in that toxic dump of a house with all those chemicals and fumes had rotted his brain. He slammed his hand against the steering wheel, making Kendra jump. And now he has cut us off. Do you understand what that means? Do you have any idea what kind of hole we are in? Kendra looked at him, confusion clouding her teary eyes. What hole, Blake? You said the startup was doing great. You said the investors were lining up. You said the cash flow issue was just a timing thing with the bank transfers. Blake stared at the road ahead. The speedometer crept past 80. He couldn't lie anymore. Not entirely. The walls were closing in and he needed an accomplice, not just a wife. The investors are cautious, Kendra, he said, choosing his words carefully. They want to see liquidity. They want to see stability. And my credit cards. He paused, swallowing hard. My cards are maxed out, Kendra. All of them. The Amex, the Visa, the business line of credit. I put everything into the launch. The marketing, the office space, the dinners to woo clients. It costs money to make money. How much? Kendra asked, her voice barely audible over the hum of the engine. 80,000, Blake said. The number hung in the air like a poisonous gas. $80,000, Kendra shrieked. You told me we were debt-free. You told me the wedding was paid for by your parents. My parents paid for the venue, Blake snapped. I paid for the rest. The flowers, the band, your dress. That dress cost $12,000, Kendra. Do you think that money fell out of the sky? I did it for you. I did it to give you the wedding you deserved. And now I have creditors calling my personal cell phone 5 times a day. I have a balloon payment due on the business loan next week. If I miss it, they liquidate the company. They take everything. Kendra stared at him, horror dawning on her face. She looked out the window at the passing scenery, the suburban strip malls and car dealerships blurring into streaks of color. So we are broke, she whispered. We are illiquid, Blake corrected sharply. There is a difference. We have assets. We have potential. But right now we need cash. We need a bridge loan. And your father was supposed to be that bridge. He merged into the left lane, cutting off a minivan without signaling. We need to think strategically, Kendra. Your father is sitting on a gold mine. That land he lives on. It is a double lot in a developing zone. Developers would pay $500,000 for that dirt just to bulldoze that shack. And then there is his pension, his Social Security, Joel. Whatever he has stashed in those accounts he hides. He glanced at her, his eyes cold and calculating. He attacked us, Kendra. He threatened us with a deadly weapon. You saw it. I saw it. That is assault. That is evidence of mental decline. What are you saying? Kendra asked, shrinking away from him slightly. I am saying he is a danger to himself and others, Blake said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. He is clearly suffering from dementia or some kind of psychotic break. Normal people do not hoard money and then attack their children with baseball bats. Normal people do not cut off their family over a wedding invitation. He is sick, Kendra, and it is our duty as his family to help him. Help him how? We need to get him into a facility, Blake said. A safe place, a controlled environment where he can be monitored. A nursing home, Kendra asked. But Dad hates hospitals. He would never go. It is not up to him anymore, Blake said firmly. Not after today. We go to court. We file for emergency guardianship. We tell the judge he was violent and erratic. We tell them he is living in squalor. Once we have guardianship, we control his assets. He let the idea sink in. We sell the house. We use the proceeds to pay for his care, and we manage the rest. We pay ourselves a management fee for handling his affairs. It is perfectly legal. It is what families do. Kendra looked unsure. She bit her lip nervously. But a nice nursing home costs a fortune, Blake. If we put him in a private facility, it will burn through the house money in a few years. Who said anything about a private facility? Blake scoffed. There are state facilities, Kendra. Government funded. They are perfectly adequate. He is a simple man, right? He likes simple things. He does not need a private suite with a view. He needs a bed and 3 meals a day. He smiled a cruel, tight smile. We put him in a state home. We sell the house. We take control of his accounts to manage his estate. That $80,000 of debt disappears overnight. The startup gets the infusion it needs, and we get our lives back. We win. Kendra was silent for a long time. She looked at her hands. She thought about the penthouse. She thought about the social circles she was trying so hard to break into. She thought about the shame of eviction. Then she looked at Blake. "Do you really think we can do it?" "I know we can," Blake said. "He handed us the weapon when he picked up that bat. We just need to pull the trigger." He reached over and squeezed her knee. "It is for his own good, babe. He is clearly suffering. We are doing the responsible thing." Kendra nodded slowly. Her face hardened. The fear was replaced by a cold resolve. "Okay," she said. "Let us do it. He humiliated us. He deserves it." Blake let out a sigh of relief. He pressed down on the accelerator, the Mercedes surging forward with a powerful growl. He felt invincible. He had turned a disaster into an opportunity. He was a businessman, after all. Back in the quiet kitchen, Garrett Freeman sat at his small table. The coffee in his mug was cold, but he didn't care. He had not moved since the car left the driveway. He had simply sat there listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock on the wall. He was not angry anymore. Anger is a hot, burning thing. What he felt now was cold. It was the temperature of deep space. It was the feeling of a door closing and locking forever. He reached for his phone. He dialed a number he knew by heart. It was a private line, a line that bypassed secretaries and automated menus. Cohen, speaking a voice, answered immediately. "It is Garrett. I have the paperwork drafted for the startup debt acquisition," Cohen said. "My team is moving fast. We should own his liabilities by Monday morning." "That is good," Saul Garrett said, "but I need you to accelerate the car." "The car? You mean the Mercedes?" "Yes. I want it off the road, today. Now." Cohen paused. "Garrett, if we report it stolen, that is a felony stop. They will have guns drawn. It could get messy." I looked at the empty spot in the living room where Sarah's picture used to sit before Blake knocked it down. "They are driving a vehicle they do not have permission to drive," Garrett said. "I revoked that permission the moment they threatened me in my home. They are in possession of stolen property. Initiate the recovery." "You want me to call the police or the repo agency?" Cohen asked. "Call the police," Garrett said. "Tell them the vehicle has been taken without authorization by a family member who has been cut off financially and has made threats of violence. Tell them I fear for the safety of the public with him behind the wheel." "Understood, Garrett. Consider it done." Garrett hung up. He stood and walked to the window. He watched a squirrel run across the power line that connected his house to the grid. He knew every inch of that wire. He knew how fragile the connection was. One snap, and the lights went out. Blake and Kendra were speeding down the highway, surrounded by leather and steel and the illusion of safety. They thought they were the predators planning how to carve up the old man's life. They didn't know they were already prey. 10 miles away on the interstate, Blake was feeling better. The plan was solid. He would call his lawyer friend as soon as they got to the city. They would draft the petition for incompetency over lunch. He turned up the music. A heavy bass beat filled the cabin, vibrating through the seats. "We are going to be fine, babe," he shouted over the music. "Better than fine. We are going to be rich." Kendra smiled weakly, adjusting her sunglasses. "I just want this to be over," she said. "I just want him to be handled." Suddenly the music cut out. The infotainment screen on the dashboard went black. "That is weird," Blake said, tapping the screen. Then the engine sputtered. The smooth purr of the German engineering turned into a rough cough. The car began to decelerate. "What is happening?" Kendra asked, panic rising in her voice again. "I do not know," Blake said, pressing the gas pedal. Nothing happened. The car was losing power. "It is entering limp mode." Blue and red lights exploded in the rearview mirror. Not one police car. 3 of them. "Oh God," Blake said. "Is it a speed trap? I wasn't going that fast." He steered the dying car onto the shoulder. The power steering was heavy, fighting him. He wrestled the wheel, bringing the heavy SUV to a stop on the gravel strip beside the highway. The police cars pulled in behind them. They didn't park normally. They fanned out, blocking the lane, creating a barrier. "Stay in the car," Blake hissed. "Let me handle this. I will tell them we are having mechanical trouble." He reached for the door handle. Before he could open it, a voice boomed over a loudspeaker. "Driver of the silver Mercedes, turn off the vehicle. Place your keys on the dashboard. Put your hands out the window. Do it now." Blake froze. "What the hell?" he whispered. "Do it now!" the voice roared. Blake's hands were shaking so bad he dropped the keys twice before he managed to put them on the dash. He rolled down the window and stuck his hands out into the cold air. Passenger, put your hands on the dashboard where we can see them. Kendra was sobbing now. Her hands were trembling as she pressed them against the leather dash. Dad did this, she wailed. I know he did. Blake watched in the side mirror as two officers approached the car. Their hands were resting on their holsters. They looked serious. They looked like they were approaching a crime scene, not a breakdown. One officer came to Blake's window. He was a large man with mirrored sunglasses. Step out of the vehicle, sir. Slowly. Blake opened the door and stepped out. His legs felt like jelly. Officer, there is a misunderstanding, Blake stammered. This is my father-in-law's car. I am authorized to drive it. Turn around, face the vehicle, hands behind your back. Blake felt the cold steel of handcuffs click onto his wrists. The metal bit into his skin. You are under arrest for grand theft auto and unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, the officer said, reciting the words with practiced indifference. The owner reported this vehicle stolen 30 minutes ago. Stolen. Blake screamed as he was shoved against the hot metal of the car door. I didn't steal it. I pay the lease. Well, he pays the lease, but it is my car. Not anymore, sir, the officer said. He looked over at Kendra, who was being pulled out of the passenger side by a female officer. She was screaming, kicking her heels, dragging in the gravel. My dad is Garrett Freeman, she yelled. Call him. He will tell you this is a mistake. The officer looked at Blake with a look of pure pity mixed with disgust. Mr. Freeman is the one who called it in, son. He said you threatened him and took the vehicle by force. Blake watched as a tow truck backed up toward the Mercedes. It was a flatbed. The driver hopped out wearing coveralls that looked exactly like the ones Garrett wore. He started hooking chains to the undercarriage. Blake looked at his Italian loafers now covered in roadside dust and grime. He looked at Kendra, who was being led into the back of a squad car. Her designer dress twisted her face a mask of running mascara. He realized then that the old man hadn't just cut them off. He had declared war. And for the first time in his life, Blake Sterling was terrified. The officer grabbed Blake's arm and marched him toward the patrol car. As he was pushed into the back seat, the smell of stale sweat and plastic hitting his nose, he saw the tow truck lift the Mercedes into the air. It looked like a trophy being hoisted. We are going to sue him, Blake muttered to himself, rocking back and forth. We are going to destroy him. But deep down in the pit of his stomach, a cold, heavy stone was forming. He knew the truth. They had poked the bear, and the bear had just taken its first bite. The sun had barely risen over the rooftops of my neighborhood when I felt the shift in the air. It was a Monday, but it felt like the calm before a hurricane. I sat in my kitchen drinking coffee from a mug that was chipped on the rim. I listened to the house settle. I listened to the refrigerator hum. I knew they were coming back. Rats do not give up when they smell cheese. They just look for a different hole in the wall. I had spent the weekend preparing. I was not a man who relied on hope. I relied on copper wiring and circuit breakers and surveillance. I had installed the new system on Sunday afternoon. It was a 4K resolution camera no bigger than a pinhead hidden inside the faceplate of the electrical outlet above the kitchen counter. It looked exactly like a screw. It was pointed directly at the medicine cabinet where I kept my heart medication. I knew Blake. I knew how his mind worked. He was a cornered animal now. He had lost the car. He was about to lose the company. He needed a win. And the only way he could win was if I lost everything. At 10 in the morning, a generic sedan pulled up to the curb. It was not the Mercedes. That was sitting in an impound lot somewhere gathering dust. This was a rental. Blake and Kendra got out. They were dressed conservatively. Blake wore a sweater instead of a suit. Kendra wore a modest dress and flat shoes. They looked like concerned children coming to check on their aging father. But it was the third person who caught my eye. A woman stepped out of the back seat. She was wearing a beige trench coat and carrying a thick leather binder. She had the tired, suspicious eyes of someone who has heard every lie in the book. She was a social worker. I knew it instantly. They were playing the competency card. I unlocked the front door and sat back down at the kitchen table. I put my reading glasses on the table. I placed my iPad face down next to them. I waited. The knock was gentle this time, respectful. It was a performance. Come in, I called out, my voice deliberately sounding a little raspy, a little weak. The door opened. Kendra walked in first, her face a mask of worry. Dad, we brought someone to see you. Blake followed her, looking solemn. He didn't look at me. He looked at the floor. The woman in the trench coat stepped inside and closed the door. She looked around the living room, noting the old furniture, the dust motes dancing in the light, the general lack of modern amenities. "Mr. Freeman," she said, "my name is Mrs. Gable. I am with Adult Protective Services. Your daughter and son-in-law have filed a report expressing deep concern for your well-being." I looked at her. I looked at Kendra. Concern. I said, "Is that what we are calling it today?" "Dad, please," Kendra said, her voice trembling with fake emotion. "We are just worried. You have been acting so erratic. The violence with the baseball bat, the confusion about the wedding. We just want to make sure you are okay." Mrs. Gable stepped forward. "Mr. Freeman, the report states that you threatened family members with a weapon and that you have been neglecting your financial obligations due to confusion. It also mentions that you may be forgetting to take vital medication." I leaned back in my chair. "I see," I said. "And you are here to evaluate me." "I am here to have a conversation," Mrs. Gable said, taking a seat opposite me. "I just want to ask you a few questions. Check your living conditions." "Of course," I said. "Would you like some tea? I was just about to make a pot." "That would be lovely," Mrs. Gable said, softening slightly. I stood up slowly, exaggerating the stiffness in my knees. I shuffled toward the stove. "Kendra, honey," I said, "could you help me with the cups? My hands are shaking a bit today." Kendra jumped up, eager to play the helpful daughter. "Of course, Dad. You sit down. I will get them." I sat back down. "Blake, honey," I said, looking at him, "while she gets the cups, could you hand me my pill organizer from the counter? It is right there by the toaster. I think I missed my morning dose. My heart feels a little fluttery." Blake's head snapped up. His eyes widened. He looked at the counter. He looked at Mrs. Gable, who was busy writing something in her binder. He looked at me. I saw the thought form in his brain. It was like watching a light bulb flicker on in a dark room. This was his chance. "Sure, Garrett," Blake said, his voice smooth. "Let me get that for you." He walked over to the counter. His back was to Mrs. Gable. His body blocked her view of his hands. But he was facing the outlet. He was facing the tiny black dot inside the screw head. I watched him. I didn't blink. He reached for the blue plastic organizer. His hand moved fast. He reached into his pocket with his other hand. I saw the flash of a small amber bottle. He popped the Tuesday compartment of my organizer. He tipped the contents into his palm and shoved them into his pocket. Then he shook 2 pills from his own bottle and dropped them into the Tuesday slot. They were white. My heart pills were blue. He snapped the lid shut. He put his bottle back in his pocket. The whole thing took 3 seconds. He turned around, a smile plastered on his face. "Here you go, Garrett," he said, walking over and placing the organizer on the table. "Do not want to miss a dose. That could be dangerous." "Thank you, Blake," I said. "You are a good boy." Mrs. Gable looked up from her notes. "It is good to see you have support, Mr. Freeman. Memory lapses regarding medication can be a serious sign of decline." Kendra brought the tea. She set the cups down. Her hands were shaking, but not from age. She was shaking from adrenaline. "Dad, take your pill," she urged. "Mrs. Gable needs to see that you are taking care of yourself." I looked at the organizer. I looked at the little white pills sitting in the Tuesday slot. Sleeping pills. Powerful ones. Probably Xanax or Ambien. Enough to make a man slur his words. Enough to make him stumble. Enough to make him look like he belonged in a home. I picked up the organizer. I held it in my hand. "You know, Mrs. Gable," I said. "I have always prided myself on my attention to detail. I was a lineman. You miss a detail in my line of work, you die." Mrs. Gable nodded politely. "That is a very demanding job, Mr. Freeman, but as we age, our faculties can slip without us noticing." "That is true," I said, "but sometimes it is not the mind that slips. Sometimes it is the people around us." Blake shifted in his seat. "Just take the pill, Garrett. Stop rambling." I put the organizer down. I didn't open it. Instead, I picked up my iPad. "I think before we continue with the evaluation, Mrs. Gable," I said, tapping the screen, "we should watch a short movie." "A movie?" Kendra asked, confused. "Dad, what are you doing?" I swiped the screen and tapped the icon for the security app. I selected the live feed history. I rewound it 2 minutes. I turned the iPad around and placed it in the center of the table. The screen was bright and clear. The 4K resolution showed every pore on Blake's face. Mrs. Gable leaned in. On the screen, Blake walked to the counter. The angle was perfect. It was low looking up. It showed his hands clearly. It showed him taking the pills out of the organizer. It showed him taking the bottle from his pocket. It showed the swap. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. I watched Blake's face drain of color. He looked like he was going to vomit. Kendra put her hand over her mouth, a small strangled noise escaping her throat. Mrs. Gable watched the video twice. Then she paused it on the frame where the white pills fell into the blue plastic slot. She looked up. Her eyes were no longer tired. They were hard as flint. She looked at Blake. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice icy, "what exactly did you just put in Mr. Freeman's medication container?" Blake stammered. I don't, that is not what it looks like. I was just organizing them." He gets confused. "I was helping." Mrs. Gable stood up. She picked up the organizer from the table. She popped the Tuesday slot open. She tipped the white pills into her hand. "Mr. Freeman, what color are your heart pills usually?" "Blue, ma'am," I said. "Small blue ovals." She looked at the round white tablets in her palm. "These look like sedatives," she said. She turned to Blake. "Tampering with a vulnerable adult's medication is a felony, Mr. Sterling. Attempting to chemically alter a senior's mental state during a competency evaluation is fraud." No, you don't understand," Kendra cried, standing up. "My dad is sick. Blake was just trying to calm him down. He gets agitated. We were scared, Mrs." Gable turned her gaze to Kendra. "You filed a report claiming your father was incompetent. You brought me here under the pretense of a safety check. And I just watched your husband attempt to drug him in my presence." She pulled her phone from her pocket. "I am terminating this assessment immediately. I am keeping these pills as evidence. And I will be filing a report with the police regarding this incident. You have wasted my time and you have placed this man in danger." She looked at me. "Mr. Freeman, do you feel safe in this home with these individuals present?" "No, ma'am," I said. "I do not." "Then I suggest you ask them to leave. If they refuse, I will call the officers myself." I looked at Blake. He was shaking. The arrogance was gone. The entitlement was gone. He looked like a child who had been caught stealing from the collection plate. "You heard the lady," I said. "Get out." Blake looked at the iPad. He looked at the pills in Mrs. Gable's hand. "You set me up," he whispered. "You old bastard. You knew." I didn't say anything. I just stared at him. "Come on." "Blake." Kendra grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the door. "We have to go. Now." They scrambled out the door faster than they had come in. They didn't look back. Mrs. Gable stood there for a moment. She put the pills in a small plastic bag she pulled from her binder. "Mr. Freeman," she said, "I see a lot of sad things in my job. Families fighting over money, neglect. But this was cold. They want the house," I said simply. "And the pension." She nodded. "I will be submitting my report by the end of the day. It will state clearly that you are fully competent and that there was an attempt by the petitioners to falsify your condition. They will not be able to file for guardianship again, not in this state." "Thank you, ma'am," I said. She walked to the door. She stopped and looked back at the outlet on the wall. "Nice camera," she said. "I was a lineman," I said. "I know how to wire things." She smiled a thin, tight smile. "Take care, Mr. Freeman. Change your locks." "I will," I said. She left, closing the door softly behind her. I sat alone in the kitchen. The tea was getting cold. I picked up the iPad and saved the video clip. I emailed it to myself. Then I emailed it to Saul. I typed a short message. "Evidence for the file. Add attempted poisoning to the list." I hit send. I felt a deep ache in my chest. It wasn't my heart condition. It was the realization that my daughter had stood there and watched. She had watched him try to drug me. She had encouraged me to take the pill. She was willing to erase my mind to fill her bank account. I stood up and walked to the sink. I poured the tea down the drain. The game had changed. They weren't just greedy children anymore. They were dangerous. They were willing to cross lines that couldn't be uncrossed. I walked to the front door and locked the deadbolt. Then I went to the back door and wedged a chair under the handle. I went to my bedroom and opened the closet. I pulled out my old travel bag. I wasn't going to stay here tonight. It wasn't safe. If they were desperate enough to use drugs, they were desperate enough to come back with something worse. I packed a few changes of clothes. I packed my documents. I was going to a hotel, a nice one with security cameras in the lobby and a doorman who checked IDs. I was going to become a special person for a few days. But before I left, I had one more call to make. I dialed the number for the Sterling residence, Blake's parents. The phone rang twice. "Hello," a woman's voice answered. Crisp. Haughty. "Mrs. Sterling," I said. "This is Garrett Freeman, Kendra's father." "Oh, Garrett." The disappointment in her voice was palpable. "What is it? We are just sitting down to lunch." "I apologize for the interruption," I said. "I just wanted to let you know that your son and my daughter just left my house. There was an incident involving Adult Protective Services and some sedative pills." "What are you talking about?" she snapped. "I am sending you a video file," I said. "It is quite illuminating. I thought you should see it before the police contact you." "The police. Watch the video, Mrs. Sterling, and tell your husband that the building he owns on 45th Street, the one with the structural issues." "Yes. I bought the lien on it this morning. We need to discuss the renovations. They are going to be expensive." I hung up before she could answer. I picked up my bag and walked out to my truck. The war was escalating, and I was bringing in the heavy artillery. The elevator ride to the penthouse took 40 seconds. I counted every single one of them. The doors slid open to reveal the foyer of the apartment I had paid for over the last 3 years. The air smelled of expensive lilies and arrogance. I stepped out onto the marble floor. I was wearing my best flannel shirt and dark jeans. My boots were polished, but they were still work boots. I had dressed this way on purpose. I wanted them to see exactly who I was. I wanted them to see the man they were trying to rob. Kendra was waiting for me. She looked nervous. She was wearing a dress that cost more than my first truck. She fiddled with her diamond necklace. "Dad," she said, her voice tight. "Thank you for coming. Please just be polite. Blake's parents are very particular." I looked at her. "I am always polite, Kendra." She led me into the living room. The view of the city was breathtaking. The sun was setting, painting the skyline in gold and purple. It was a view worth $4,500 a month, a view that was currently unpaid for. Blake was standing by the wet bar mixing drinks. When he saw me, he stiffened. He whispered something to the older couple standing by the window. They turned. Preston and Meredith Sterling. They looked exactly like I expected. Preston was a tall man with silver hair and a tan that came from spending winters in St. Bart's. He wore a navy blazer with gold buttons. Meredith was thin and sharp with hair that didn't move and jewelry that clinked when she breathed. "So this is the famous Garrett," Preston said. His voice was loud, booming. It was the voice of a man who was used to being listened to. He walked over, but he didn't offer his hand. He just looked me up and down like he was inspecting a used car he had no intention of buying. "Blake tells us you are a handyman," Preston said. "Good for you. Honest work. The world always needs people to fix toilets." I didn't blink. "I am a retired electrical contractor," I said. "Same difference." Preston waved his hand dismissively. "Labor is labor. Come. Sit. Meredith has ordered a caterer. We are celebrating." "Celebrating what I asked." "The future," Preston said with a shark-like grin. "The future of our children." We sat at the long glass dining table. The place settings were elaborate. Crystal glasses, silverware that felt heavy in the hand. The food was brought out by servers in white coats, tiny portions of fish, vegetables I couldn't pronounce. The conversation started with Blake. He launched into a monologue about his startup. He used buzzwords like synergy and disruption. He talked about changing the paradigm. Preston nodded along, looking proud. Meredith sipped her wine and looked bored. I sat there and ate my fish. I listened. I watched. Then Preston turned his attention to me. "Blake tells me you are sitting on a nice piece of property, Garrett." I put my fork down. "I have a house, yes." Preston laughed. It was a dry, condescending sound. "A house. It is a double lot in a prime development zone." I looked it up. "Do you have any idea what that land is worth to the right buyer?" "I have an idea," I said. "Then why are you holding on to it?" Preston asked, leaning forward. "Blake says the place is a dump. No offense. But why live in squalor when you could cash out? You could give that money to Blake, let him invest it. He could turn that $500,000 into $5 million in a few years." I looked at Blake. He was staring at his plate, refusing to meet my eyes. "I am comfortable where I am," I said. "Comfortable?" Preston scoffed. "A man like you doesn't know what comfort is. You are used to scrapping. You are used to getting by. But think about your legacy, man. Think about Kendra. Do you want her to be embarrassed by you forever?" The table went silent. Kendra made a small noise in her throat. "Excuse me," I said. Preston took a sip of his wine. He swirled the red liquid in the glass. "Let us be frank, Garrett. We are all adults here. You are from a different world. You work with your hands. We work with our minds. You save pennies. We create wealth. It is just biology. Some people are meant to lead, and some are meant to serve." He gestured around the room. "Look at this place. This is where Kendra belongs. This is the life she deserves. But maintaining this standard requires capital. Blake needs liquidity. And you are sitting on a pile of dead equity just letting it rot. It is selfish, really." "Selfish," I repeated. "Yes, selfish," Preston said. "You are holding them back. You are a heavy anchor, Garrett. You should sell that shack. Give the money to Blake. Go find a nice state-funded facility where you can play checkers and wait for the end. Let the people who know how to handle money take over." He smiled. It was the most insulting smile I had ever seen. "People like you, Garrett, you just let money mold. You stick it under a mattress. You do not understand the velocity of capital. You do not understand power." I looked at Meredith. She was looking at me with pure pity. "Preston is right, dear," she said. "It would be for the best. You really do not fit in this world. It must be exhausting trying to pretend." I looked at Kendra. I waited for her to speak. I waited for her to defend me. I waited for her to say that I had worked 18-hour days to put her through school. I waited for her to say that I was a good father. She looked up at me. Her eyes were wet. "Dad," she whispered. "Maybe they are right. Maybe it is too much house for you. Blake could really use the help." The final string snapped. It didn't make a sound. It just severed. I picked up my napkin and wiped my mouth. I placed it gently on the table. "You think I do not understand power, Preston?" I asked quietly. Preston laughed again. "I think you understand how to change a fuse, Garrett. I do not think you understand how the world works." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. "Excuse me," I said. "I need to send a message." Preston rolled his eyes. Meredith sighed. Blake looked nervous. I unlocked my phone. I opened my secure messaging app. I found the contact labeled Saul Cohen. I typed a message. It was short. It was precise. "Buy the Weston Tower. The whole building. Cash offer. 20% over asking price. Close tonight." I hit send. I watched the little checkmark appear. Delivered. Then it turned blue. Red. 3 seconds later, 3 dots appeared. Saul was typing. Then a single word came back. "Done." I put the phone back in my pocket. I looked at Preston. I looked at the man who thought he was a king because he had a blazer with gold buttons. "I understand how the world works perfectly, Preston," I said. I stood up. The chair scraped against the floor. "The world works on ownership, and you own nothing." "What are you talking about?" Preston demanded, his face turning red. "I own companies. I own real estate. Do you?" I asked. "Or does the bank own them?" Preston slammed his hand on the table. "How dare you? You uneducated peasant. Sit down. We are not finished." "We are finished," I said. I walked toward the door. The sound of my heavy boots on the marble was loud, echoing. "Where are you going?" Blake shouted. "You cannot just walk out." I stopped at the archway of the living room. I turned back. I looked at the 4 of them sitting around the glass table like vultures waiting for a carcass. "Thank you for dinner," I said. I looked at the walls, I looked at the ceiling, I looked at the floor. "Enjoy the apartment," I said. "Enjoy the view, enjoy the luxury." I paused, because it might be your last meal here. "What is that supposed to mean?" Kendra cried. "It means the landlord has changed," I said. I opened the front door. "And the new landlord is very particular about who he rents to." I walked out into the hallway. I didn't wait for the elevator. I took the stairs. As I descended the 40 floors, I didn't feel tired. I felt energized. I felt the blood pumping through my veins. Preston Sterling thought power was a loud voice and a gold button. He thought power was insulting a man in his own language. He was wrong. Power is silence. Power is a text message sent from a dinner table that changes the ownership of a 50-story skyscraper. Power is knowing that while they were eating their fish and drinking their wine, I had just bought the roof over their heads. I walked out of the lobby into the cool night air. I looked up at the building. It was a tower of glass and steel reaching for the stars. And now it was mine. Every brick, every window, every lease, including the lease for Penthouse 4B. I walked to my truck parked around the corner. I climbed in and started the engine. It roared to life, a rough, honest sound. I pulled out into traffic. I drove toward the highway, toward my small house on the double lot. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from my bank. A transfer alert. $120 million had just moved from my holding account. I smiled. It was a lot of money, a fortune to most. But to see the look on Preston Sterling's face when the eviction notice arrived on Monday morning, that was going to be priceless. I turned on the radio. A blues song was playing. I hummed along as I drove. The Sterlings wanted a lesson in economics. They wanted to talk about the velocity of capital. Well, the capital had just moved, and it was moving straight toward them like a freight train. Monday morning was going to be a very special day for very special people. Monday morning arrived with the gray steel sky of a Chicago autumn. The air was crisp and biting, the kind of weather that makes your joints ache if you have spent too many years climbing utility poles in the wind. I parked my truck a block away from the Gilded Bean, a coffee shop in the financial district where a cup of black coffee cost $8 and the air conditioning was always set to freezing to keep the patrons awake and anxious. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I was wearing my oldest coveralls, the ones with the paint stains on the knee and the fraying hem. I had a tool belt slung over my passenger seat and I put it on, fastening the heavy leather buckle around my waist. I grabbed a pair of wire cutters and stuck them in the loop. I looked like I had just crawled out of a crawl space. I looked like the Invisible Man. Inside that coffee shop, Blake Sterling was sitting at the best table by the window. I knew this because I had access to his calendar. I had access to a lot of things since Saul Cohen had started digging into his digital life. Blake had a meeting at 10 o'clock. It was a meeting with the managing partner of Helios Capital, a venture capital fund that specialized in tech startups. Blake was asking for $2 million. He called it seed money. I called it a bailout. I walked down the street, my heavy boots clumping on the pavement. People in suits stepped around me, giving me a wide berth, clutching their briefcases a little tighter. They saw a laborer. They saw someone who fixed things they did not want to touch. They did not see the man who owned the pavement they were walking on. I pushed open the glass door of the coffee shop. The smell of roasted beans and expensive cologne hit me instantly. The hum of conversation was low and serious. Deals were being made here. Lives were being traded on the stock market apps open on every laptop. I spotted Blake immediately. He was wearing a new suit, probably put on a credit card he had opened that morning. He was sweating. A thin sheen of perspiration coated his upper lip, and he kept wiping his palms on his napkin. He was talking fast, his hands moving in jerky, animated gestures. Sitting across from him was a man in his 50s with silver hair and a suit that cost more than Blake's car. He was listening impassively, his face unreadable. That man was Arthur Penhaligon. He was the face of Helios Capital. He was the man who decided who got the gold and who got the door. I walked straight toward their table. Blake saw me when I was about 10 feet away. His eyes went wide, popping out of his head like a cartoon character. He stopped mid-sentence. His mouth hung open. Then his shock turned to pure, unadulterated panic. He jumped up from his chair so fast he knocked over the sugar dispenser. It shattered on the floor, sending white crystals scattering across the polished tiles. "What are you doing here?" Blake hissed, rushing to intercept me before I could reach the table. He blocked my path, his chest heaving. He looked around wildly to see if anyone was watching. Everyone was watching. "Get out," he whispered furiously. "Get out right now." I looked at him calmly. I adjusted my tool belt, letting the metal tools clink together. "I am just here for a coffee, Blake," I said, my voice loud enough to carry. "You followed me, didn't you?" Blake spat. "You are stalking me. You are trying to ruin this. Do you know who that is over there? That is Arthur Penhaligon. He is about to give me $2 million. Is he?" I asked. "Yes, he is," Blake said, his voice rising in hysteria. "And I am not going to let a jealous, bitter old man ruin my chance. Look at you. You look like a bum. What do you want?" "Money. Is that it? Are you here to beg?" He dug into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled $20 bill. He shoved it at my chest. "Here, take it. Go buy yourself a sandwich and a beer and get the hell out of here." "You are embarrassing me. You are embarrassing Kendra." I looked at the $20 bill. It was pathetic. It was the gesture of a man who thought money solved everything, even when he didn't have any. "I do not want your money, Blake," I said. I pushed his hand away. "Then what do you want?" he screamed, losing all control. "Why are you haunting me? Go fix a toilet. Go change a light bulb. You do not belong here, Garrett. This is where the big boys play. This is high finance. You are just a grease monkey with a grudge. He grabbed my arm, trying to shove me toward the door. Security! He yelled, looking toward the counter. I need security over here. This man is harassing me. He is a vagrant. The barista looked up alarmed. A security guard by the door started to move toward us, his hand on his belt. But before the guard could take 3 steps, a voice cut through the noise. It was a deep, calm voice that commanded absolute silence. Mr. Sterling, unhand that man immediately. Blake froze. He turned around slowly. Arthur Penhaligon had stood up. He wasn't looking at Blake. He was looking at me. He buttoned his suit jacket with a respectful, deliberate motion. He walked around the table, ignoring the spilled sugar crunching under his expensive shoes. He walked right past Blake as if Blake didn't exist. He stopped in front of me. He bowed his head slightly, a gesture of profound respect. Chairman Freeman Arthur said, "You are early. We didn't expect you until the quarterly review next week." The silence in the coffee shop was absolute. You could hear a pin drop. You could hear the hum of the espresso machine. Blake made a noise in his throat. It sounded like a dying animal. "Chairman," he whispered. I looked at Arthur. "Hello, Arthur," I said. "I apologize for the attire. I was doing some work at one of the properties. I decided to stop by and check on the investments." "Of course, Sir," Arthur said. "You are welcome any time. Please sit down." Arthur pulled out a chair. Not his chair. The chair at the head of the table. I walked past Blake. I sat down. The tool belt clunked against the wood. I put my heavy work boots up on the leg of the table. Arthur sat back down. He looked at me expectantly. "We were just reviewing a pitch from this young man," Arthur said, gesturing vaguely at Blake, who was still standing in the middle of the room, his face a mask of ash-gray shock. "He claims to have a revolutionary algorithm for cryptocurrency arbitrage. He is asking for a seed round of $2 million. I looked at the pitch deck lying on the table. It was glossy. It had colorful charts and graphs. It was full of words like synergy and paradigm shift. I reached out with my rough, calloused hand and pulled the booklet toward me. I flipped through it. "I see," I said. Blake stumbled back to the table. He gripped the back of the chair, his knuckles white. "Garrett," he wheezed. "Dad, what is going on?" "You know him." Arthur looked at Blake with ice-cold eyes. "Mr. Sterling, please address the chairman with the proper respect. Mr. Freeman owns Helios Capital. He is the majority shareholder. He provides 80% of our liquidity. Without him, this fund does not exist." Blake's knees gave out. He literally collapsed into the chair opposite me. He looked from me to Arthur, then back to me. His brain was trying to rewrite reality, and it was failing. "You," he stammered, "you are the investor, but you drive a Ford, you fix wires." I closed the pitch deck. I looked Blake in the eye. "I fix wires, Blake, because I like fixing things," I said. "I drive a Ford because it is reliable. And I own this fund because I know the difference between value and noise." I tapped the glossy booklet with my index finger. "And this," I said, "this is noise." Blake began to sweat profusely. It was pouring off him, soaking his collar. "Garrett, please," he begged, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I need this. I really need this. The debts, the car, everything. If I do not get this funding, I am finished. I will lose everything." "You have already lost everything, Blake," I said. "You just haven't signed the paperwork yet." I looked at Arthur. "What is your assessment of the proposal, Arthur?" Arthur cleared his throat. "Technically, it is thin, sir. The projections are optimistic, to say the least. The burn rate is high. The founder's salary he requested is exorbitant. But he came with strong references from the Sterling family, so we were giving it a courtesy review." "References," I said. "You mean his parents?" "Yes, sir." I looked at Blake. He was trembling. He looked small. He looked like a boy playing dress-up in his father's suit. "Let me tell you about this founder, Arthur," I said. "This founder has $80,000 in consumer debt. This founder leases cars he cannot afford. This founder lives in a penthouse that was paid for by his father-in-law because he couldn't make rent. This founder has no product, no team, and no integrity." Blake flinched with every word as if I were hitting him. "Garrett, stop, please," he moaned. "Do not do this. Not here." I ignored him. "This founder," I continued, "threatens senior citizens in their own homes. He attempts to steal assets from family members. He mocks the working class while begging for their money." I picked up the pitch deck. I held it up. "This is not a business plan, Arthur. This is a scam. This is a desperate attempt to cover up a failed life with other people's money. I looked at Blake. Trash project, I said. I tossed the booklet across the table. It slid off the edge and landed in the spilled sugar on the floor. Cancelled. Arthur nodded immediately. He didn't even look at the booklet. Understood, Chairman. We will pass on the opportunity. He turned to Blake. Mr. Sterling, we are declining your request for funding. You will receive a formal rejection letter by email. Now, if you will excuse us, the chairman and I have matters to discuss. Blake didn't move. He couldn't move. He was paralyzed. $2 million, he whispered. Gone. Just like that. I leaned forward. It was never yours, Blake. It was a fantasy. Just like your empire. Just like your status. You are not a special person, Blake. You are a bad investment. I pointed to the door. Now take your $20 and get out, before I call security. And Blake, unlike you, I actually own the building, so when I call security, they listen. Blake stood up. He looked like a ghost. He looked at me one last time. There was no anger in his eyes anymore, only fear. Pure, unadulterated fear. He turned and walked away. He didn't run. He shambled. He walked past the people in suits who were pretending not to look. He walked past the barista who was wiping the counter. He walked out the glass door and into the gray morning. I watched him go. Arthur signaled to a waiter. Clean up this sugar, please. And bring the chairman a black coffee. I sat back in my chair. I felt the weight of the tool belt on my waist. It felt good. It felt real. You were hard on him, Sir Arthur said quietly. He needed it, I said. He needed to hit the bottom. Arthur nodded. Did you want to review the quarterly numbers, sir? The real estate portfolio is up 12%. Not today, Arthur, I said. Today I just want to sit here and drink a cup of coffee. I looked out the window. I could see Blake standing on the corner waiting for the light to change. He looked lost. He looked like a man who had just woken up from a dream and found himself in a nightmare. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Saul Cohen. Eviction notice served. Locks changed at the penthouse. Their stuff is on the curb. I smiled. The fall was complete. The tech entrepreneur was homeless, penniless, and funding less. But the war wasn't over. Kendra was still out there. And desperation makes people do crazy things. I took a sip of the coffee. It was bitter and hot. I was ready for whatever came next. I was Garrett Freeman. I was the chairman. And I was just getting started. Desperation has a distinct smell. It smells like stale sweat and cheap cologne, trying to cover up fear. I smelled it the moment I opened my front door on Tuesday afternoon. Blake and Kendra were standing on my porch. They looked like they had slept in their clothes. Blake's shirt was wrinkled and his eyes were red-rimmed. Kendra was pale, her makeup applied with a heavy hand to hide the dark circles under her eyes. They did not look like the golden couple of Chicago anymore. They looked like junkies, looking for a fix, Dad, Kendra said, her voice trembling slightly. We need to talk. It is about your health insurance. I stood in the doorway, blocking their path with my body. I did not invite them in immediately. I let them stand in the cold wind for a moment. I wanted them to feel the chill. My health insurance is fine, I said. I have been with the union for 40 years. I have full coverage. No, Dad. That is the thing. Blake cut in his voice, jagged and fast. They changed the policy. We got a notice because we are your emergency contacts. You are at risk of losing your coverage if you do not sign these update forms today right now. He held up a thick manila envelope, his hand shaking so hard the papers rattled inside. I looked at them. I looked at my daughter, the girl I had carried on my shoulders, the girl whose scraped knees I had bandaged. She was looking me right in the eye and lying to me. She was conspiring to strip me of the only security I had left. Come in, I said, stepping aside. They rushed past me into the kitchen. They did not look at the photos on the wall. They did not look at the home they grew up in. They only had eyes for the kitchen table, the flat surface where they could lay out their trap. Blake spread the papers out fan style. There were dozens of pages, small print, dense legal jargon paragraphs of text, designed to make your eyes glaze over. We highlighted where you need to sign, Blake said, pulling a cap off the expensive-looking pen. Just sign by the yellow stickers, Dad. We will handle the filing for you. We just want to make sure you are protected. I sat down slowly, lowering my heavy frame into my chair. I made a show of patting my pockets, checking my shirt, checking my pants. Shoot, I muttered. I cannot find my reading glasses. I must have left them in the truck. Blake's face twitched. You do not need to read it, Dad. It is just standard boilerplate stuff. HIPAA compliance beneficiary updates. Boring admin work. Just sign. I do not sign what I cannot read. Blake, I said, my voice slow and confused, playing the part of the old fool they thought I was. Kendra put a hand on my shoulder. Her touch was cold. It felt like a betrayal. Dad, please, she said, urgency leaking into her tone. The office closes in an hour. If we do not get this faxed over, you will be uninsured tonight. What if you have a heart attack? What if you fall? You would lose the house to medical bills. We are trying to save you. Save me. The irony was so thick I could taste it. I leaned over the papers, squinting my eyes, making a show of trying to focus on the blurry lines. I was not blind. My vision was 20. 20, I had just had it checked last month, but they did not know that they only saw what they wanted to see. A helpless old man, ripe for the picking. I scanned the documents without my glasses. They were clever. I had to give them that. The top 3 pages were indeed insurance forms, standard stuff, harmless. But page 4 was different even without reading the header. I recognized the layout. I had been a contractor for 40 years. I had bought and sold more property than Blake had ever seen. I knew what a quitclaim deed looked like. It was buried in the middle, sandwiched between a privacy policy and a liability waiver. It was a document that would transfer the title of my house and the double lot it sat on directly to Blake Sterling and Kendra Sterling for the sum of $1. They were trying to steal my home right in front of my face. My heart hammered against my ribs, a slow, heavy drum of rage, but my face remained blank. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I let my hand tremble as I reached for the pen. Okay, honey, I said, my voice raspy. If you say it is important, I trust you. Blake let out a breath. He did not know he was holding. His eyes lit up with a greed so pure it was almost blinding. He thrust the pen into my hand. Right here, Garrett, just sign on the line. Initial, the bottom. I held the pen over the paper. I let the tip hover just millimeters above the line. I watched them, watch me. They were holding their breath. They were already spending the money. They were imagining the bulldozers flattening my house. They were imagining the cash hitting their accounts. My hand shook violently. I dropped the pen. It clattered onto the table and rolled onto the floor. Oops, I said. Clumsy old fingers. Blake scrambled under the table to get it. He popped up, his face red, his patience snapping. Just hold the pen tight. Garrett, focus. I took the pen back. I looked at the tip. I frowned. This ink looks dry. I said, do you have another one? Use this one, Blake said, shoving another pen at me. Just sign the damn paper. I shook my head. Stubborn old man style. No, I do not like ballpoints. I have my own pen, my signing pen. I use it for all my important papers. I reached into the pocket of my flannel shirt and pulled out a heavy black pen. It looked old, scuffed. It looked like something I had found in a junk drawer. Here we go, I said, clicking the top. Blake looked at his watch. He was sweating now, pouring sweat. Fine, just sign it. Garrett, use a crayon for all I care. Just put your mark on the paper. I leaned over the quitclaim deed. I positioned my hand so it blocked their view of the signature line. I pressed the tip of the pen to the paper. I did not write Garrett Freeman. I wrote 2 words in a looping, messy cursive that looked remarkably like a signature, if you did not look closely. Void null. I added a little flourish at the end, a squiggle that looked like an initial. I lifted the pen. There, I said, is that it? Blake snatched the paper from under my hand before the ink was even dry. He didn't even look at the signature. He just saw ink on the line, and that was enough for him. He flipped to the next page and the next, forcing me to initial the dummy documents to make it look real. Okay, that is it, Blake said, gathering the stack up in a messy pile. His hands were shaking so bad he almost dropped them. We have to go, Dad, Kendra said, backing away toward the door. We have to get this to the post office. You are not staying for coffee, I asked, putting on my best lonely old man face. No time, Garrett. Maybe next week, Blake called out already halfway to the car. They ran to their rental sedan, they threw the papers in the back seat and peeled out of my driveway, leaving me standing in the doorway. I watched them go. As soon as the car disappeared around the corner, I straightened my back. The stoop disappeared. The confusion vanished from my eyes. I walked back to the kitchen table and picked up my phone. I dialed Saul Cohen. "They took the bait, Saul," I said. "Did they sign Garrett, Saul?" asked his voice sharp. "I signed it." I said, "But I used the special pen, and I signed it. Void null. You got pictures." I tapped the screen of my phone, opening the gallery while I was leaning over the table pretending to be blind. I had my phone in my other hand resting on the table. Camera lens facing down, recording the whole thing. I had captured the document. I had captured my hand writing void null. I had captured Blake snatching it away. I have video. "Saul," I said, high-definition audio and visual. I have them presenting a quitclaim deed as an insurance document. I have them coercing a senior citizen. I have the fake signature. Beautiful, Saul said simply. Beautiful. That is fraud, forgery, elder abuse, and conspiracy. We have them dead to rights. "What do we do now?" I asked. "Now we wait." Saul said, "Let them file it. Let them walk into the county recorder's office and file a fraudulent deed. Let them commit the crime. Officially, once that stamp hits the paper, it is a felony right now. It is just an attempt. Once they file it, it is prison time." I hung up the phone. I looked at the pen in my hand. It was a simple gel pen. Nothing magic about the ink. The magic was in the word void null. In the legal world, that is not a signature. It is a declaration. It is a statement that the document is invalid on its face. But Blake, in his greed and his arrogance, hadn't even checked. He thought he was smart. He thought he was playing chess with a pigeon. He didn't realize the pigeon was a grandmaster. I walked into the living room and sat in my recliner. I closed my eyes. I could imagine them right now in the car, high-fiving each other, thinking they had won the lottery, thinking they had finally beaten the old man. They were driving straight off a cliff, and they didn't even know it. I thought about Kendra. I thought about the little girl who used to color at the kitchen table while I paid bills. I thought about the teenager who asked me to drop her off a block away from school so her friends wouldn't see my truck. I had tried. I had really tried. I had given her everything I could, and in return she tried to steal the roof over my head. A deep sadness settled over me, a heavy gray blanket. But underneath the sadness was a core of steel. I was done being the victim. I was done being the doormat. I stood up and went to the garage. I had a project I was working on, restoring an old generator. It needed a new carburetor, it needed patience, it needed steady hands. I picked up a wrench. The cold steel felt good in my hand, solid, real. I started to work. Let them file the papers. Let them pop the champagne. Let them celebrate their victory. Tomorrow the hammer was going to fall, and when it did, it was going to shatter their world into a million pieces. I tightened a bolt, listening to the metal groan. They wanted my house. They were going to get a cell. I worked until the sun went down, until my hands were covered in grease, until I was too tired to think about my daughter's betrayal. I showered, ate a sandwich, and went to bed. I slept like a baby. The next morning I woke up at 6. I made my coffee. I sat on the porch. At 9 o'clock my phone buzzed. It was a text from Saul. They just filed it. I took a sip of coffee. Proceed. I texted back. The trap was sprung. The cage door had slammed shut. Now all I had to do was watch them squirm. Monday mornings in a penthouse usually smell like espresso and expensive moisturizer and that specific brand of entitlement that comes from waking up above the rest of the world. Blake and Kendra were sleeping soundly, buried under 600 thread count Egyptian cotton sheets, dreaming of the money they would get from selling my house. They were dreaming of the sports cars they would buy and the vacations they would take. They were dreaming of a life without consequences. But reality has a way of waking you up. And on this particular Monday, reality sounded like a sledgehammer hitting a solid oak door. It was exactly 6 in the morning when the pounding started. It was not a polite knock. It was the heavy, authoritative thud of law enforcement. The sound echoed through the cavernous apartment, bouncing off the floor-to-ceiling windows and the marble countertops. Sheriff Department, open up. Blake bolted upright in bed, his eyes wild and confused. He looked at the digital clock blinking on the nightstand. He looked at Kendra, who was pulling the duvet up to her chin, her face a mask of terror. "What is going on?" she whispered. "I do not know," Blake snapped, climbing out of bed and grabbing his silk robe. "Maybe it is a mistake. Maybe they have the wrong apartment. Stay here." He marched out of the bedroom, down the long hallway toward the foyer. He was trying to summon his usual arrogance, trying to put on the face of the important businessman, but his bare feet slapped against the cold floor, making him look small and vulnerable. He unlocked the door and threw it open, ready to yell, ready to threaten a lawsuit. He found himself staring at the chest of a Cook County Sheriff deputy, a man who looked like he chewed gravel for breakfast behind him. Were 2 more officers and a team of 4 movers wearing blue jumpsuits holding empty cardboard boxes. "What is the meaning of this?" Blake demanded, his voice cracking slightly. "Do you know what time it is? Do you have any idea who I am?" The deputy did not blink. He did not look impressed by the silk robe, or the view of the skyline, or the smell of money. He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a folded document. He slapped it into Blake's chest with enough force to make him stumble back. "Blake, Sterling, and Kendra. Sterling, you are hereby served with an immediate order of eviction and asset seizure for non-payment of rent and breach of lease agreement. You have 30 minutes to vacate the premises." "Eviction!" Blake laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound that bounced off the walls. "That is impossible. My father-in-law is the guarantor. He pays the rent check. Your records officer, this is a harassment suit, waiting to happen." The deputy stepped inside, forcing Blake to retreat. The movers followed, flowing into the apartment like a blue tide. They started unfolding boxes immediately. The sound of packing tape ripping was loud and violent in the quiet morning. "The guarantor canceled the contract 90 days ago, the deputy said, consulting a clipboard. "The back rent is 3 months overdue, totaling $13,500 plus legal fees and interest. Since you have no proof of payment, the management company has authorized the seizure of personal property to cover the debt seizure." Blake screamed, "You cannot take my stuff. That is my stuff." Kendra appeared in the hallway wrapped in a sheet, her hair messy, her eyes wide with horror. "Blake, make them stop," she shrieked. "Tell them to stop touching my things." A mover was already taking her designer handbags off the shelf in the entryway. He was tossing them into a cardboard box with no regard for the leather or the brand names. Another mover was unplugging the massive television in the living room, coiling the cord like a snake. "I am calling the landlord," Blake yelled, fumbling for his phone, his hands shaking so bad he almost dropped it. "I know the management here. I play golf with the owner. He will fire all of you." "Go ahead. Call him," the deputy said, crossing his arms and leaning against the doorframe. He looked bored. He looked like he had done this 1,000 times before. Blake dialed the number. He put it on speakerphone so the officers could hear the owner grovel and apologize. The line rang once, twice, then a voicemail picked up. "You have reached the offices of Shadowy Hills Management. Please note that as of Saturday evening, this property has been acquired by a new ownership group. For all inquiries regarding the Weston Tower, please contact the new management office." Blake lowered the phone slowly, his face draining of color. "New ownership," he whispered. "Yes," the deputy said. "The building was sold this weekend. Cash deal fast. Close, the new owner takes possession, effective immediately. And the first order of business was clearing out the deadbeats." "Deadbeats," Kendra gasped. "I am not a deadbeat. My father has money." "Your father is not here." "Am," the deputy said. "And according to the paperwork, he is the one who authorized the eviction process. Now get dressed. You have 20 minutes left." Blake stood in the middle of his living room watching his life get packed into boxes. He watched his expensive espresso machine get tossed into a bin. He watched his limited edition sneakers get swept off the rack. He looked like a captain watching his ship sink, but he still had one card to play, or so he thought. He turned to the deputy, his eyes narrowing. "I want to speak to the representative of the new owner right now. I have rights. I have tenant rights. You cannot just throw us out on the street without a hearing." The elevator dinged softly. The doors slid open. A woman stepped out. She was not a police officer. She was not a mover. She was wearing a sharp navy blue business suit, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. She held a leather portfolio in her hands, and she walked with the kind of confidence that can strip the paint off a car. She walked right past the deputy, right past the movers, and stopped in front of Blake. She looked at him with an expression of clinical detachment, like a scientist examining a particularly disappointing specimen. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice cool and crisp. "I am Ms. Harper. I am the executive assistant to the chairman of the new holding company. I am here to oversee the transition." Blake puffed out his chest, trying to regain some height, trying to intimidate her. "Ms. Harper, you are making a huge mistake. My lawyers will own this building by the time I am done with you. Who is this chairman? Who is this person who thinks he can treat me like this? Get him on the phone. I want to talk to him man to man. Ms. Harper smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a shark that just smelled blood in the water. The chairman has no interest in speaking with you, Mr. Sterling. He prefers to communicate through action. However, he did ask me to deliver this to you personally. She opened her portfolio and pulled out a single sheet of heavy cream-colored paper. She handed it to Blake. Blake snatched it, his eyes scanning the text. Kendra peered over his shoulder, reading along. It was a letter. It was short. It was brutal. To Mr. Blake Sterling and Mrs. Kendra Freeman, regarding lease number 4. B. Weston Tower. Effective immediately, your tenancy is terminated due to non-payment and violation of the moral turpitude clause of the rental agreement. Freeman Holdings does not extend housing privileges to individuals who threaten senior citizens, attempt to defraud family members, or engage in elder abuse. Please vacate the premises immediately. Signed, Garrett Freeman, Chairman. Freeman Holdings. Blake stopped reading. He stared at the signature. He stared at the name. He blinked, trying to make the letters rearrange themselves into something that made sense, something that didn't shatter his entire worldview. Freeman. Kendra whispered, her voice barely audible. Freeman Holdings, Dad. No, Blake said, shaking his head, a manic grin stretching his face. No, this is a joke. This is some kind of sick prank. Your dad is a handyman. Kendra, he fixes sinks. He drives a truck. He does not own a skyscraper. He does not have a holding company. Ms. Harper stepped forward, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Mr. Freeman started his electrical contracting business 40 years ago. Mr. Sterling, he built the grid this city runs on. He invested every penny he made into commercial real estate while you were buying shoes. He was buying city blocks while you were leasing cars. He was acquiring deeds. He is the majority shareholder of the group that just purchased this building for $120 million cash. She paused, letting the number hang in the air like a guillotine blade. $120 million. Kendra collapsed her legs, simply gave out, and she slid down the wall to the floor. She didn't cry. She just stared at the air, seeing her father in his grease-stained coveralls, seeing him eating sandwiches in his truck, seeing the man she had mocked and dismissed and tried to rob. He owns it, she whispered. He owns everything, and he knows everything. Ms. Harper added, looking down at her with cold eyes. He knows about the pills. Mr. Sterling, he knows about the fake deed you filed yesterday. He knows about the debts you are trying to hide. He knows it all. Blake dropped the letter. It fluttered to the floor, landing next to his bare feet. This is illegal, he stammered. This is entrapment. He cannot do this. He is the landlord, Ms. Harper said simply. And you are trespassing. She turned to the deputy officer. Remove them. The deputy nodded. He stepped forward, pulling a pair of zip ties from his belt. Not for wrists, but for dignity. Let's go. Folks, time is up. Get your clothes on or go out in your robe, your choice. The next 10 minutes were a blur of humiliation. Blake and Kendra scrambled to pull on clothes while the movers stripped the apartment bare. They watched their furniture get tagged for auction. They watched their electronics get seized. They watched their life get disassembled and packed away to pay a debt they could never afford. When they were finally escorted to the elevator they were carrying, nothing but the clothes on their backs and 2 Louis Vuitton duffel bags that the movers had graciously allowed them to keep because they were deemed personal items, not assets. The ride down to the lobby was silent. Ms. Harper stood at the front of the car, staring straight ahead. Blake stared at the floor, his face a mask of shock. Kendra wept silently, tears ruining her silk blouse. The doors opened into the lobby. The doorman, the one Blake had never tipped, the one Blake had snapped his fingers at, was standing by the glass doors, holding them open. He looked at Blake. He looked at the bags. He looked at the deputies escorting them. Good morning, Mr. Sterling, the doorman said, his voice devoid of any warmth. Have a nice day. They were marched out onto the sidewalk. The city was waking up. People were rushing to work, grabbing taxis, holding coffees. Cars were honking. The noise of the city was loud and indifferent. The deputy stopped at the curb. You are barred from the premises, he said. If you return, you will be arrested for trespassing. Good luck. The glass doors swished shut behind them. The lock clicked with a finality that felt like a gunshot. Blake and Kendra stood on the sidewalk, the wind whipping around them, cold and biting. They looked at their Louis Vuitton bags sitting on the dirty concrete. They looked at each other. They had no car. It was in an impound lot. They had no home. It was owned by the man they tried to destroy. They had no money. Their accounts were frozen or empty. Blake looked up at the tower, shielding his eyes from the sun. He counted the floors up to the penthouse, where he had stood just last night, drinking wine and feeling like a king. Now he was just a man on the street holding a bag he couldn't eat, wearing a suit he couldn't pay for. "What do we do?" Kendra asked, her voice thin and small like a child's. "What do we do now?" Blake looked at her. He saw the fear in her eyes, but he also saw the accusation he saw, the realization that she had bet on the wrong horse. "I do not know," he whispered. "I do not know." A black town car pulled up to the curb in front of them. The window rolled down slow and smooth. Blake's heart leaped for a second. He thought maybe it was mercy. Maybe the old man had made his point and was sending a car to pick them up. Maybe this was just a lesson, a cruel, hard lesson, but one that ended with a safety net. The back window lowered completely. It was not Garrett Freeman inside. It was Preston Sterling, Blake's father. He looked furious. His face was red. His silver hair was messy, as if he had run his hands through it 1,000 times. "Dad," Blake cried, rushing toward the car. "Thank God you have to help us, Garrett. He is crazy. He threw us out. He owns the building, Dad. He owns the whole thing." Preston Sterling didn't unlock the door. He didn't offer a ride. He looked at his son with a mixture of horror and disappointment. "You idiot," Preston hissed. "You absolute moron, Dad. What do you know who called me this morning?" "Blake, the bank. The bank called me. They called the loans on the construction company. All of them immediate repayment." "Do you know why?" Blake shook his head, backing away from the venom in his father's voice. "Because someone bought the debt. Blake, someone bought the distressed assets of Sterling Construction at a discount this morning at 6 a.m., and that someone sent me a memo regarding my son's behavior." Preston looked up at the tower, then back at his son. "You picked a fight with a whale. Blake, you picked a fight with a man who can buy and sell us before breakfast, and you dragged me into it. Dad, please, we have nowhere to go." Preston rolled the window up. "Figure it out, Blake. You are a smart boy. Figure it out." The car pulled away, merging into traffic, leaving a cloud of exhaust in its wake. Blake watched his father leave. He watched his last lifeline disappear into the city grid. He looked at Kendra. She was sitting on her Louis Vuitton bag, her head in her hands, sobbing. Openly on the street corner, passers-by gave them a wide berth, looking at them with curiosity and disdain. A couple in expensive clothes, crying on the curb at rush hour. It was a pathetic sight. High above them on the 42nd floor, Garrett Freeman stood by the window looking down. He held a cup of coffee in his hand. He watched the black car drive away. He watched the two figures on the sidewalk. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just took a sip of his coffee and turned back to the room. Ms. Harper was standing there holding a file. "The locks are changed." "Chairman," she said, "the unit is secured." "Thank you, Ms. Harper," Garrett said. "List it for rent. Market rate." "Yes, sir." "And Ms. Harper." "Yes, sir. Make sure the credit check is thorough. This time we do not want any more squatters." "Yes, sir." Garrett walked to the door. He had a meeting with a lawyer. He had a lawsuit to file. He had a lesson to finish teaching. He walked out of the penthouse, leaving the view for someone who could actually afford it. The street corner looked like the scene of a high society shipwreck. Blake and Kendra were huddled together on their designer luggage, shivering in the morning chill, while the rest of the city marched past them, indifferent to their misery. I watched them from the glass doors of the lobby, taking a moment to appreciate the symmetry of it all. Just a week ago, they had been looking down on me from a penthouse. Now they were sitting on the concrete, waiting for a rescue that was not coming. But I knew the Sterlings would not give up that easily. Pride is a powerful fuel, even when the tank is empty. I saw the black Lincoln Navigator turn the corner aggressively, cutting across 2 lanes of traffic to screech to a halt in front of the building. It was Preston and Meredith returning for round 2. They did not look like the composed aristocrats who had sneered at me over dinner. Preston slammed his door open and marched toward me, his face a mask of purple rage. Meredith followed close behind her heels. Clicking frantically on the pavement, she was clutching her pearls, as if they were the only thing keeping her upright. I stepped out onto the sidewalk to meet them. I wanted this to be public. I wanted the world to see Garrett. You son of a bitch, Preston roared, ignoring his son who was trying to stand up behind him. You have crossed the line. You have gone too far. I stood my ground, my hands clasped behind my back, calm as a statue. I did not know there was a line, Preston. I said, I thought we were just doing business. You told me I needed to understand how the world works. I believe I am demonstrating that now. Business, Preston spat. This is not business. This is a vendetta. You evicted my son. You stole his car. You humiliated him in front of investors. I am going to sue you for everything you have. I will bury you in litigation until you are begging for mercy. I looked at him unimpressed. You can try, Preston, I said, but lawyers cost money, and I have a feeling your cash flow is about to get very tight. Preston laughed, a harsh barking sound that lacked any real humor. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a checkbook. He whipped out a gold pen and scribbled furiously on the top check. He tore it out with a violent motion and crumpled it in his fist. You think this is about money? He sneered. You pathetic little man. You think you can buy your way into our world. You are nothing but a laborer. A grunt with a lucky bank account. He threw the crumpled ball of paper at my face. It bounced off my chest and landed in a puddle of dirty water near my boot. There is $100,000, Preston shouted. Pick it up. That is more than you used to make in 5 years. Take it and go away. Leave my son alone. Give him back his apartment and crawl back to whatever hole you came from. I looked down at the check soaking up the street water. The ink was already starting to run $100,000. It was a lot of money to most people, but to Preston it was a weapon, a way to silence the help. I did not bend down. I did not pick it up. I signaled to Ms. Harper, who was standing quietly in the doorway. She stepped forward, holding a thick black folder. I do not want your money. Preston, I said, my voice dropping an octave. I want your attention. Preston looked at Ms. Harper, then back at me. What is this? He demanded. More paperwork. I will wipe my ass with your eviction notices. It is not an eviction notice, I said, taking the folder from Ms. Harper. It is an acquisition report. I opened the folder and pulled out a stack of documents clipped together with a red tag. You see, Preston, while you were busy insulting me at dinner on Saturday, I was busy looking into your family business. Sterling Construction has been the premier builder in the city for 30 years, correct? Preston puffed out his chest. Damn right. We built this skyline. You built it on a foundation of sand, I corrected. I have here a report from an internal audit of your company. It seems you have been under-reporting income to the IRS for the last decade. You have been categorizing personal expenses as business losses. You have been paying undocumented workers under the table to avoid payroll taxes. Meredith gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. That is a lie, she shrieked. That is slander. Is it? I asked, holding up a spreadsheet. This is your private ledger. Meredith, the one you keep on the server in your home office. You really should invest in better cybersecurity. My team cracked it in 20 minutes. Preston's face went from purple to a sickly shade of gray. He took a step back, his arrogance faltering. Where did you get that? He whispered. That is illegal. Information is only illegal if you steal it, I said. I bought it. I bought the debt you owe to the Citibank. Did you know your construction loans were callable? Preston, did you know there was a clause that allowed the bank to demand full repayment if there was any evidence of financial impropriety? Preston was sweating now, beads of perspiration popping out on his forehead. The bank would never call those loans, he stammered. We have a relationship. I play golf with the VP. You played golf with the VP. I said past tense this morning at 8 a.m. I had a meeting with the board of directors of Citibank. I presented them with this evidence of tax fraud and money laundering. I offered to buy your distressed debt for 50 cents on the dollar. I took a step closer to him, invading his space. They sold it to me, Preston. I own your loans. I own the lien on your equipment. I own the mortgage on your house in the Hamptons. And I own the note on that Lincoln Navigator you parked in the fire lane. Preston swayed on his feet. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. You bought the debt, he wheezed. Every cent. I said $12 million in liabilities. And since you are currently in violation of the fraud covenants of those loans, I am calling them in immediately. I pulled a document from the back of the folder and held it out. This is a notice of default and immediate repayment demand. You have 24 hours to pay. Freeman Holdings, $12 million, or I begin the seizure of all personal and business assets. Preston stared at the paper, his eyes bulging. He grabbed his chest, his hand clutching the lapel of his expensive blazer. He made a choking sound, a gurgle deep in his throat. "My heart," he gasped. "My heart." He collapsed to his knees right there on the sidewalk, his expensive pants soaking up the grime. He slumped forward, breathing in ragged, shallow gasps. "Preston," Meredith screamed, dropping to her knees beside him. "Help him! Someone! Help him! He is having a heart attack!" Blake and Kendra stood frozen by their luggage, watching their safety net unravel, watching the invincible patriarch crumble into a heap of old clothes and bad decisions. I looked down at him. I did not feel joy. I did not feel pity. I felt the cold satisfaction of a circuit finally being completed. "Ms. Harper, call an ambulance," I said calmly. Ms. Harper was already on the phone, giving the address. "You killed him," Meredith shrieked, looking up at me with eyes full of hate. "You killed him, you monster!" "I did not kill him, Meredith," I said, looking at her coldly. "The truth killed him. The weight of his own lies killed him." Meredith's eyes rolled back in her head. The shock was too much. She slumped sideways, fainting dead away, landing softly on top of her husband. There they were, the Sterling Empire, the kings and queens of society, lying in a heap on the sidewalk in front of the building they used to look down on. Blake finally moved. He ran to his parents, dropping to his knees. "Dad, Mom, wake up." He looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. "What did you do?" "Garrett," he sobbed. "I collected a debt." "Blake," I said simply, "I collected a debt." The sound of sirens grew louder in the distance. The ambulance was coming. I handed the black folder to Blake. "Here," I said, "give this to the paramedics. They will need to know who is paying for the ride because your father's insurance was tied to the company. And as of this morning, that company is insolvent." Blake took the folder, his hands shaking so hard he almost dropped it. I turned my back on them. I walked back toward the glass doors of the lobby. The doorman held the door open for me, his face impassive. "Good morning, Mr. Freeman," he said. "Good morning, Henry," I said. I walked into the elevator and pressed the button for the penthouse. I had a lot of work to do. Acquiring an empire takes a lot of paperwork, and I wanted to make sure every T was crossed and every I was dotted. The Sterlings were finished. They were dust, but Kendra was still my daughter, and that was a loose end. I needed to tie up. I watched the numbers climb on the elevator display. The air at the top was thin and cold, but it was clean. It smelled like justice. It was raining 3 days after the Sterling Empire collapsed, and it was not a gentle spring shower. It was a cold, hard Chicago rain that scoured the streets and turned the sky the color of a bruised plum. I was sitting in my living room with the lights off, listening to the water hammer against the roof. It was a sound I loved. It sounded like the world was being washed clean. I was not waiting for anyone. The police had finished their reports. The lawyers had filed their motions. Blake was in custody awaiting a bail hearing that he could not afford, and the penthouse was empty, stripped, and locked tight. I thought the drama was over. I thought the silence was permanent. Then I heard it. It was not the arrogant pounding of a fist. It was not the authoritative knock of a sheriff. It was a scratching sound, a weak, desperate clawing at the wood of my front door like a stray animal trying to get out of the storm. I knew who it was before I stood up. I felt it in my bones the same way I used to feel a storm coming. When I was up on the line, my old injuries ached whenever trouble was near, and right now my heart was aching. I walked to the door slow and steady. I did not rush. I unlocked the deadbolt and turned the handle. The wind caught the door and ripped it open, blowing rain into my entryway. Kendra was kneeling on my porch. She did not look like the woman who had sneered at me over a plate of fish 4 days ago. She did not look like the special person who belonged in a country club. She looked like a wreck. Her expensive hair was plastered to her skull in rat tails. Her mascara had run down her face in black rivers, staining her neck. She was wearing a thin designer jacket that was soaked through, and she was shivering so violently I could hear her teeth chattering from where I stood. She looked up at me, and her eyes were wide and red and terrified. She looked at my boots, the same work boots she had been ashamed of, and she reached out her hands, grasping for the laces like a drowning woman, reaching for a rope. "Daddy," she sobbed the word, cracking in her throat. "Daddy, please, let me in. It is cold." I stood there like a statue. I did not step back, but I did not reach down to help her up. 20 years ago. I would have scooped her up and wrapped her in a blanket and made her hot cocoa 20 years ago. I would have burned the world down to stop her from shivering. But 20 years ago, she hadn't tried to put me in a state facility so she could sell my home. "Get up, Kendra," I said, my voice flat, barely carrying over the sound of the rain. She tried to stand, but her legs gave out. She slipped on the wet concrete, scraping her knees. She wailed a high, thin sound of misery. She crawled forward across the threshold, dragging her wet clothes over the floor I had just polished. "I am sorry, Daddy," she cried, grabbing the hem of my jeans, burying her face in the denim. "I am so sorry. I did not know. I swear, I did not know. He made me do it. Blake made me do it." I looked down at the top of her head. I watched. The rain dripped from her hair onto my boots. "He made you do it?" I asked. Yes, he is a monster," she babbled, looking up at me with pleading eyes. "He manipulated me, Daddy. He told me you were sick. He told me we were helping you. I was brainwashed. I was scared. He yelled at me. If I didn't agree with him, I am a victim too. Daddy, you have to believe me." I stepped back, breaking her grip on my leg. "You were not a victim when you called me about the rent. I said you were not a victim when you stood in this living room and watched him threaten me with a baseball bat. You were not a victim when you sat at that dinner table and let his parents treat me like a dog." She shook her head frantically, flinging droplets of water everywhere. "I was confused," she screamed. "I was trying to keep the peace. I love you, Daddy. I have always loved you. Remember when I was little? Remember when we went fishing? Remember when you taught me to ride a bike? I am still that little girl. I am still your princess." She was playing the nostalgia card. She was reaching back into the past, trying to find the bond she had severed. She was using my memories as a weapon, trying to cut through my resolve. And then she said, the one thing she should never have said, "Mom would not want this," she whispered, her voice dropping to a hush. "Mom would want you to open the door. Mom would want you to save me. She would be heartbroken to see you treating me like this." The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Do not speak her name," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "But it is true," Kendra cried. "Mom loved me. She would forgive me. She would tell you to be a father." "You want to talk about being a father?" I asked. I turned my back on her. I walked into the kitchen. She stayed on the floor sobbing, thinking I was going to get her a towel, thinking I was going to get her a glass of water, thinking she had won. I walked to the junk drawer next to the fridge. I pulled it open inside, nestled among the rubber bands, and the spare keys was a small black notebook. It was a spiral-bound memo pad, the kind you can buy for 50 cents. The cover was torn and stained with grease. The pages were yellow and crinkled. I picked it up. It felt heavy in my hand, heavier than a gold bar. I walked back to the living room. Kendra was sitting up now, wiping her face, expecting mercy. I threw the notebook at her. It landed in her lap with a dull thud. "What is this?" she asked, looking down at it. "Read it," I said. She opened the cover, her hands shaking. The ink was faded but legible. My handwriting was small and precise, block letters. "Read the first page," I commanded. She squinted through her tears, reading aloud, her voice trembling. December 24th, 1999. Double shift, overtime. Blizzard conditions, temperature 5 below zero, worked 16 hours. Reason, Kendra wants the limited edition dollhouse, cost $200. "Turn the page," I said. She turned it. August 10th, 2005, heat wave, 100 degrees, working in the attic of the municipal building, insulation installation. Reason, Kendra needs braces, cost $4,000. Turn the page. She was crying harder now. Not the manipulative tears from before, but tears of shame. She flipped through the book. May 2010, missed lunch all month. Sold the old truck. Reason, Kendra wants to go to cheer camp, cost $1,500. There were pages and pages of it. Every sacrifice, every skipped meal, every hour of overtime, every time I had swallowed my pride and taken a job beneath my skill level just to put cash in my pocket for her. "That book is the story of my life as your father," I said, my voice hard as iron. That book is a record of every time I put you before myself, every time I bled for you, every time I froze for you, every time I sweated for you. I did it because I loved you. I did it because I promised your mother I would give you a good life. Kendra closed the book. She clutched it to her chest, rocking back and forth. I know, Daddy. I know you worked hard. Appreciate it. No, you do not. I said you do not appreciate it because if you appreciated it, you would not have tried to steal the house that those hours of labor built. You would not have tried to declare me incompetent to get your hands on the money that sweat produced. I stepped closer to her, looming over her. You said you were manipulated. I said you said you were a victim. Let me tell you what I saw. I saw a woman who was embarrassed by her father. I saw a woman who wanted a shortcut. I saw a woman who looked at me and saw a resource, not a person. But I can change, she pleaded, getting to her knees, reaching for me again. I can be better. I learned my lesson. Daddy, look at me. I am on my knees. I have nothing. Blake is gone. I have no money. I have no home. You are all I have. Please take me back. I will be good, I promise. I looked at her. I looked at the woman kneeling on my floor in $3,000 worth of ruined clothes, asking for a handout, and for a second, just a split second, I wanted to say yes. I wanted to pull her up and wash her face and pretend none of this happened. I wanted my daughter back. But then I remembered the wedding. I remembered the phone call. I remembered the laughter in the background as they told me I wasn't special enough. I realized then that the daughter I was mourning, the little girl who wanted the dollhouse, didn't exist anymore. She had died a long time ago, replaced by this stranger, this Mrs. Sterling who valued status over blood. I stepped back out of her reach. Stand up, Kendra, I said. She stood up slowly, hope flickering in her eyes. She thought she had broken me. She thought the checkbook was about to open. You need to leave, I said. What? She gasped, her face crumbling. You need to leave my house. But where will I go? She cried. I have nowhere. I have no one. You have yourself, I said. You are a grown woman. You are healthy. You are educated. Thanks to that book you are holding. Go get a job. Go rent a room. Go figure it out like everybody else does, Daddy. Please, you cannot do this. I am your daughter. I looked her dead in the eye. No, I said, my voice devoid of anger, devoid of love, devoid of anything but cold, hard truth. My daughter died last Saturday, Kendra. She died the moment she walked down an aisle and said, I do to a con man without her father present. She died when she decided that appearances were more important than loyalty. Kendra stared at me, her mouth open, shock freezing her features. The woman standing in front of me isn't my daughter. I continued. The woman standing in front of me is Mrs. Sterling, and from what I hear, Mrs. Sterling is bankrupt and trespassing. I pointed to the door. Get out. Kendra stood there for a long moment, shaking, watching my face, searching for a crack, searching for the dad who used to fix everything. But she found no purchase. She found only a wall. She let out a sob, a sound of pure defeat. She dropped the notebook on the floor. She turned around and walked out the door into the rain. She didn't run this time. She walked slow and heavy, the weight of her choices finally settling on her shoulders. I watched her go. I watched her walk down the driveway past the spot where the Mercedes used to be, past the mailbox. I watched her turn the corner and disappear into the gray storm. I didn't close the door immediately. I stared out into the rain, breathing in the cold air. I looked down at the notebook lying on the floor. I picked it up. I smoothed the cover. I walked to the kitchen and opened the trash can. I dropped the book inside. I didn't need the record anymore. The debt was paid. The account was closed. I walked back to the front door and pushed it shut. I threw the deadbolt. It clicked into place with a sound that felt like a period at the end of a long sentence. I was alone in my house. The silence was back, but it wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. I went to the kitchen and turned on the kettle. It was time for tea. You would think that a man who had just lost his home, his car, and his family business would have the good sense to stay quiet. You would think he would lick his wounds and try to rebuild from the ashes. But arrogance is a blinding disease, and Blake Sterling was terminal 2 weeks after the eviction. I was served with a lawsuit. It was a masterpiece of fiction. Blake was suing me for fraud, for intentional infliction of emotional distress, and for what he called predatory lending practices. He claimed I had tricked him into signing the quitclaim deed and that I had illegally seized his assets. He had found a lawyer named Silas Thorne, a man whose billboards littered the highway promising massive settlements for minor injuries. Thorne was a vulture in a polyester suit, and he smelled blood. The courtroom was cold and smelled of floor wax and old wood. Judge Vance presided, a stern man with a reputation for zero tolerance for theatrics. I sat at the defendant table next to Saul Cohen. Saul looked relaxed, almost bored. He was flipping through a thick binder of evidence like it was a magazine. Blake sat across from us next to Thorne. He looked haggard. He had lost weight and his suit hung off him, but his eyes were burning with a manic intensity. He thought this was his Hail Mary. He thought he could talk his way into a settlement. He thought he could charm the law like he charmed his investors. Thorne stood up to give his opening statement. He paced back and forth, gesturing wildly. He painted a picture of Blake as a young, ambitious entrepreneur who had been victimized by a bitter, jealous father-in-law. He called me a predator. He called me a manipulator. He claimed that I had hidden my wealth to trap Blake into financial ruin. "This man," Thorne shouted, pointing a finger at me, "sat on millions of dollars while his daughter struggled. He watched them drown just so he could buy their building and throw them into the street. It was a calculated act of malice, Your Honor, a scheme to destroy a young family." I watched Blake nod along, tears welling in his eyes. It was a good performance if you didn't know the truth. Then it was time for testimony. Thorne called me to the stand. He walked up to me smiling like a wolf. "Mr. Freeman," he said, leaning on the railing, "let us talk about your finances. You spent 40 years as a contractor. Correct?" "That is correct," I said. "You fixed wires, you climbed poles, you did manual labor." "I did." And yet, Thorne continued, his voice rising, "you recently purchased a skyscraper for $120 million cash. Tell me, Mr. Freeman, how does a simple lineman acquire that kind of capital on a salary of $50,000 a year?" I sat quietly waiting for him to finish. "Did you sell drugs?" Mr. Freeman, Thorne asked. "Did you launder money? Did you steal from your clients? It is simply impossible for a man of your station to have that kind of wealth legally. You are a fraud, sir, and this court deserves to know the source of your dirty money." Blake smirked. He thought he had me. He thought my silence was guilt. He thought I was just a hoarder who had gotten lucky. I looked at Judge Vance. "May I answer the question, Your Honor?" I asked. "Please do." "Mr. Freeman," the judge said. I turned to Thorne. "I did not just fix wires, Mr. Freeman," I said, my voice steady and clear. "I understood them in 1985. I developed a new method for high-tension cable splicing that reduced power loss by 15%. I patented it." Thorne blinked. "I beg your pardon," he said. "In 1992, I continued. I designed a surge protection protocol for industrial grids that is now standard in 40 states. I patented that too, in 2001. I invented a smart meter component that monitors usage in real time. I hold 12 U.S. patents. Mr. Thorne." I looked at the jury. "I licensed those patents to the biggest utility companies in the world. General Electric, Siemens, Duke Energy. Every time a light goes on in Chicago, I get paid. Every time a factory starts up in Detroit, I get paid. I didn't steal my money, Mr. Thorne, I invented it." I signaled to Saul, who stood up and handed a stack of documents to the bailiff. "These are certified copies of Mr. Freeman's tax returns for the last 40 years. Saul said, his voice cutting through the stunned silence of the room. "Every dime is accounted for, every royalty check, every licensing fee, every investment dividend. He has paid more in taxes than your client has earned in his entire life." Thorne looked at the papers, his face pale. He looked back at me, the narrative of the dirty blue collar. Criminal was evaporating in front of his eyes. "But why hide it?" Thorne stammered. "Why live in a shack if you are an inventor?" I leaned forward into the microphone. "Because I wanted to know who loved me. For me," I said, "and now I know." Thorne retreated to his table, defeated. He had no other questions. Saul Cohen stood up. It was our turn. "Your Honor," Saul said, "we would like to present a counter-argument regarding the character and credibility of the plaintiff. Mr. Sterling claims he is a victim of fraud. We submit that Mr. Sterling is the architect of his own destruction." Saul walked to the center of the room. "We have heard Mr. Sterling claim he is a responsible businessman who fell on hard times due to my client's cruelty. Let us look at the reality." Saul motioned to the court technician. A screen descended from the ceiling. The lights dimmed. A video began to play. It was grainy security footage from a casino floor. The timestamp was from 3 months ago, the night Blake told Kendra he was working late at the office. In the video, Blake was sitting at a high-stakes blackjack table. He was drunk, his tie was loose, he was shoving stacks of chips across the felt. "I am doubling down," he yelled in the video. "I cannot lose, I have a system." The video cut to another clip, this one from a month ago. Blake was in the back room of a jewelry store. He was handing over a watch, a Rolex. "How much for it?" Blake asked in the video. "5,000, the pawnbroker said. "It is worth 20, Blake argued. "Take it or leave it." "Fine. Give me the cash. I need to pay the bookie." The courtroom was silent. Blake was staring at the table, refusing to look at the screen. "That is the plaintiff," Saul said, narrating the footage. "Gambling away his startup capital, pawning his assets to pay illegal debts. This is not a man who was tricked, Your Honor. This is a man who burned his own house down." Saul paused. He walked over to the defense table and picked up a small flash drive. "But financial irresponsibility is not a crime," Saul said. "However, conspiracy to commit murder is." Blake's head snapped up. "Murder?" he whispered. "What are you talking about?" Saul plugged the drive into the court computer. "This audio was recorded 2 weeks ago," Saul said, in the living room of the plaintiff's former residence. "It was captured by a security device Mr. Freeman installed after the plaintiff threatened him with a baseball bat." The audio crackled to life. It was Blake's, voice clear and unmistakable. "We need the money," Kendra Blake's voice said. "I do not care how we get it, but he is my dad," Kendra's voice replied. She sounded scared. "He is an obstacle," Blake shouted. "He is old. He is useless if the stress doesn't kill him. Maybe we help it along. Pills, slip him something in his drink, make him fall down those stairs. Who is going to investigate an accident involving a clumsy old man?" The gasps in the courtroom were audible. The judge's face turned into a mask of stone. Blake turned white. He looked like he was going to be sick. He looked at Thorne, but his lawyer was inching away from him, creating distance between himself and his client. "That is out of context," Blake screamed, standing up, knocking his chair over. "I was angry. I didn't mean it. It was just talk." "Sit down, Mr. Sterling." Judge Vance barked, his voice booming like thunder. Saul stopped the recording. "Just talk?" Saul asked. "Let us look at the bank records then." He held up a piece of paper. On the day that recording that was made, Mr. Sterling withdrew $5,000 from his business account. He paid it to a man named Paul Hayes. Mr. Hayes is a known associate of the criminal underworld, a man who specializes in making problems disappear. Saul turned to the jury. Mr. Sterling wasn't just venting. He was shopping. He was shopping for a way to eliminate the man who stood between him and an inheritance he felt he deserved. Saul sat down. He didn't need to say anything else. The air had been sucked out of the room by the weight of the truth. Judge Vance looked at the papers in front of him. He looked at the tax returns. He looked at the patents. He looked at the transcript of the audio recording. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Mr. Thorne, do you have any defense for this?" the judge asked. Thorne stood up slowly. He looked at Blake with open disgust. "Your Honor, I would like to request a recess to confer with my client regarding a change of plea." "Denied," Judge Vance said instantly. "I have heard enough. This court finds no merit in the plaintiff's claims against Mr. Freeman. The suit is dismissed with prejudice." The judge turned his gaze on Blake. It was a gaze that could peel paint. "Mr. Sterling, in my 20 years on the bench, I have seen greed and I have seen stupidity, but rarely have I seen them combined in such a spectacular fashion. You came into my courtroom seeking to use the law as a weapon against a man you tried to destroy. You thought you could manipulate this court the way you manipulated your family." The judge pressed a button on his bench. "Bailiff, take Mr. Sterling into custody." Blake's eyes went wide. "Custody for what?" "For fraud," Judge Vance said, "for filing a false police report for attempted extortion, and based on the evidence presented here today, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for immediate investigation into conspiracy to commit murder and solicitation of a capital crime." Two marshals moved toward Blake. He scrambled backward, tripping over his own chair. No, you cannot do this. I am a businessman. I have rights. Kendra, help me." He looked toward the back of the courtroom. I turned to look. Kendra was sitting in the back row. She was wearing a simple gray dress. She looked small and faded. She was crying, but she wasn't looking at Blake. She was looking at her hands. "Kendra," Blake screamed. Tell them, I didn't mean it." Kendra didn't move. She didn't speak. She just closed her eyes. The marshals grabbed Blake by the arms. They hauled him up. He kicked and screamed. his dignity gone, his facade shattered. "Garrett, please," Blake wailed, looking at me, his eyes wide with terror. "I am sorry. I will pay it back. I will do anything. Just do not let them take me." I stood up slowly. I buttoned my jacket. I looked him in the eye, the same way I had looked at him in the coffee shop. "You are a special person, Blake," I said. "Special people get special treatment. Welcome to the justice system." They dragged him out the side door, his screams echoing in the hallway until the heavy wood door slammed shut, cutting off the sound. The courtroom was quiet again. Judge Vance looked at me. "Mr. Freeman, I apologize that you had to endure this. The court is adjourned." I nodded to the judge. "Thank you, Your Honor." I turned to Saul. "Good work, Saul." "Just doing my job." "Garrett," Saul said, packing up his briefcase. "Lunch is on you." "Deal," I said. I walked toward the back of the courtroom. I stopped at the row where Kendra was sitting. She looked up at me. Her eyes were red. Her face was puffy. "Dad?" she whispered. I looked at her. I looked at the daughter who had listened to her husband, plan my death, and said nothing. I looked at the daughter who had chosen luxury over loyalty. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a card. It was a business card for a temp agency, one of the ones I used to hire day laborers when I needed extra hands on a big job. "If you need work," I said, placing the card on the bench next to her. "They pay $15 an hour. It is honest. Work. It is hard. Work. It might do you some good." "Dad, please," she sobbed. I didn't say anything else. I turned and walked out of the courtroom. I walked out into the sunlight. The air smelled fresh. The city noise was a comfort. I loosened my tie. I had one more stop to make, one more loose end to tie up before I could finally rest. I walked to my truck. The engine started with a roar. The empire of lies had fallen. Now it was time to build something real on the ruins. It has been exactly 1 year since I walked out of that courtroom and into the rest of my life. The air out here is different. It does not smell like exhaust and asphalt and desperation. It smells like pine needles and wet earth and freedom. I sold the old house on the double lot to a developer just like Preston Sterling suggested. I did it on my own terms, and for 3 times the price he estimated. I used the money to buy 300 acres up north, a place with a lake that looks like a mirror in the morning and a forest that stretches as far as the eye can see. I built a house. A real house, not a shack, not a mansion, just a sturdy structure made of cedar and stone with a porch that wraps all the way around. I spend my mornings fishing and my afternoons woodworking in a shop that is bigger than my old garage. I am 69 years old, and for the first time in my life, I am truly retired. I do not think about the Sterlings much anymore, but news travels fast when you own the bank that foreclosed on them. Blake is currently serving year 1 of a 5-year sentence at a minimum security facility in downstate Illinois. I heard he works in the laundry room folding sheets for 12 cents an hour. I hope he appreciates the irony of manual labor. I hope he thinks about me every time he folds a corner. Preston and Meredith Sterling are living in a 2-bedroom apartment in a complex near the airport. It is noisy and the carpet is stained. They lost the Hamptons house, they lost the cars, they lost the social standing. The country club revoked their membership. Not because they couldn't pay the dues, though they couldn't, but because nobody wants to associate with a fraud. The last I heard, Preston was trying to sell life insurance over the phone, and Meredith was selling her old designer clothes on the internet to pay for groceries. They wanted to be special people. Now they are just people. And then there is Kendra. My lawyer, Saul Cohen, sends me a report every month. It is part of the court order regarding the restitution she owes me. The judge was not lenient. He ordered her to pay back $50,000 of the money she helped steal garnished directly from her wages. Kendra works at a diner on the south side. She pulls double shifts, waiting tables, serving coffee, wiping down counters. She lives in a studio apartment above a laundromat. Saul tells me she looks older, tired. She has lost the shine that expensive makeup and designer clothes used to give her. She looks like I used to look when I came home after a 16-hour shift. She is learning the value of $1 the hard way. Yesterday, the mailman drove up the long gravel driveway to my house. He handed me a stack of letters, mostly catalogs and investment reports. But there was one envelope that stood out. It was small and pink, and the handwriting was familiar. It was from Kendra. I took it out to the porch and sat in my rocking chair. I held it in my hands for a long time, watching the wind ripple the Surface of the lake, I debated burning it, unopened, just like I had burned that check a year ago. But curiosity is a stubborn thing. I opened it. Inside was a picture. A photograph of a baby boy with big dark eyes and a tuft of curly hair. My grandson. My heart gave a squeeze. A reflex. An instinct. It is hard to kill the part of you that wants to love. I unfolded the letter. Daddy, I know you probably hate me, and I deserve it. I am not asking for me, I am asking for him. His name is Marcus. He is sick, Daddy. He has a respiratory infection and the medicine costs $400. I do not have it. The insurance won't cover it. Please, Daddy, look at his face. He is your blood. Do not let him suffer because of my mistakes. Just send the money to the pharmacy. I included the number. I love you, Kendra. I looked at the picture of the boy, Marcus. He looked sweet. He looked innocent. For a moment, I reached for my checkbook. $400 was nothing to me. It was less than nothing. It was a drop in the ocean. But then I remembered the pills. I remembered the white tablets Blake had put in my organizer while Kendra watched. I remembered the look in her eyes when she told me I wasn't special enough. I put the checkbook down. I picked up my phone and called a number. It wasn't the pharmacy. It was a private investigator I had kept on retainer, a man named Miller who used to be a cop in Chicago. Miller, I said. It is, Garrett. Mr. Freeman, Miller answered. How is the fishing? The fishing is good, Miller. Listen, I need you to check something for me. My daughter claims her son Marcus is sick and needs medication. She claims she is broke. I need you to verify. I will drive by her place tonight, Miller said. I will let you know what I see. I waited. The sun went down, painting the sky in shades of orange and violet. I drank my tea. I watched the fireflies come out. At 9 o'clock, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Miller. Attached were 3 photos. The first photo showed Kendra leaving her apartment building. She was not wearing a waitress uniform. She was wearing a short dress and high heels. She looked done up, hairstyled, makeup, fresh. The second photo showed her entering a club called the Velvet Lounge. It was a high-end bar downtown, the kind of place where a cocktail costs $20. The third photo was taken inside the club through a window. Kendra was sitting at a booth, laughing, holding a martini glass. In front of her was a bucket of champagne. Underneath the photos, Miller had written a message. Baby is with a neighbor. She told the neighbor she was going to a job interview. Medication story is false. She is celebrating her birthday. I stared at the photos. I looked at the date on the corner of the screen. It was indeed her birthday. I had forgotten. I looked at the picture of the baby on my table. He was real, but the sickness was a lie. The need was a lie. It was just another hook. Another attempt to reel the old man back in to tap the well one more time. She hadn't changed. She hadn't learned. She was still the same person who valued appearances over truth, who would use her own child as bait to get cash for a party. I felt the last thread of connection snap. It didn't hurt this time. It just felt like a weight falling away. I picked up the letter. I picked up the photo of the baby. I walked down to the edge of the lake. The water was black and still reflecting the moon. I tore the letter in half. Then in quarters I tore the picture too. It was a hard thing to do, tearing the face of a child. I would never know, but that child was better off not knowing me. He was better off not being a pawn in his mother's game. I threw the pieces into the water. I watched them float for a second, white specks in the darkness before they soaked up the water and sank beneath the surface. Gone. I walked back up to the house. I went into my study and sat at my desk. I pulled out my checkbook, the big one, the business ledger. I wrote a check. It was for $400,000. The exact amount I had calculated I spent raising Kendra, the exact amount I had wasted on a bad investment I filled in the pay to the order of line. The Chicago Fund for Underprivileged Youth. I signed my name, Garrett Freeman, with a flourish. I put the check in an envelope and stamped it. I would mail it tomorrow. I walked out to the porch and stood there breathing in the clean air. The crickets were singing a chorus in the tall grass. The stars were bright overhead, unpolluted by city lights. I thought about Blake in his cell. I thought about the Sterlings in their cramped apartment. I thought about Kendra drinking champagne she couldn't afford. They were all prisoners of their own greed, prisoners of their own egos. I was free. I looked out at the vast darkness of my property. People say blood is thicker than water, I said aloud to the night. I shook my head. Blood is just biology. It is an accident of birth. It does not guarantee loyalty. It does not guarantee love. It does not guarantee respect. I thought about Saul Cohen, who had fought for me like a brother. I thought about Mrs. Gable, the social worker who had saved me from a nightmare. I thought about Miller, the investigator who told me the truth. Family is not who you are related to, I said. Family is who you choose. And more importantly, family is who chooses you back. I turned off the porch light. I went inside and locked the door. I had a busy day tomorrow. I had a garden to plant. I had a fence to mend. I had a life to live. And for the first time in a long time, I was going to live it for me. I spent 40 years building grids to keep the lights on for others, but I almost let my own light go out trying to please people who lived in the dark. The biggest lesson I learned wasn't about money or real estate. It was about self-respect. You cannot buy love, and you certainly cannot buy loyalty. If someone only values you for what you can provide, they do not value you at all. Cutting off my daughter wasn't an act of cruelty. It was an act of survival. Do not set yourself on fire just to keep others warm, especially when they are the ones holding the matches. Real family lifts you up. They don't drag you down. What would you have done in my place? Would you have given Kendra another chance? Or was the betrayal too deep? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more life stories. See you in the next video.